Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Zeus, the God of Olympus, Part 2. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
2 weeks later, Mount Dictee, Peak of Clouds. The war was over. The Titans were sealed, the battlefield silent, and the scars of the world had begun to heal. And for 2 weeks, Zeus hadn't touched his armor once. Instead, he stayed here, on the quiet peak of Dictee, with Métis. Sometimes talking. Sometimes walking. Sometimes they just sat in silence while clouds rolled below their feet. The storm had left his veins, and in its place was a strange new calm. She made that possible. Métis, clever, quiet, sharp in mind but soft in voice. She didn't treat him like a god. She didn't even treat him like a king. She just looked at him the same way before and after he'd taken down Cronus. It made him breathe easier. But not everyone liked that. Elsewhere, beneath the olive shrine, Hera's hand hovered over a bowl of sacred water. Her fingers traced the surface slowly, stirring the reflection until it cleared and showed Métis's face. She wasn't glaring. She wasn't fuming. She was studying. "This is not jealousy," she murmured. "This is a correction." Her eyes narrowed. "She moves like a queen already. Subtle. Steady. Clever enough to stay near him, but never too close in public. She's building a future." Her fingers curled, and the water froze solid in the bowl. Hera stood. "I won't allow it." This wasn't rage. This wasn't some broken-hearted tantrum. This was a calculation. She had spent the war watching everything. Who fought? Who fled? Who stayed loyal? And now, she watched who dared think themselves worthy to stand beside the king of the skies. And she had found only one obstacle. Métis. The next day, Garden of Aegis Métis stood beneath a fig tree, speaking with Hestia. She was calm, smiling. But she felt it. The weight in the wind. Hera approached like sunlight over a blade. Warm, regal, and dangerous if you looked too long. "Sister," Hera said softly, "you've been spending a lot of time with Zeus." Métis nodded. "He asked me to help build the new world. I said yes." "So that's what you're doing?" Hera tilted her head. "Building." "Of course." A pause. Then Métis smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "And you? Are you helping build, or rearrange?" Their gazes met. Long. Still. Hera chuckled and walked past, but Métis turned slightly, watching her go. "She's planning something," Métis whispered under her breath. But she didn't confront her. Because smart queens don't strike early. They let the trap close first. 3 days later, Throne Summit Zeus stood at the center of the high altar, looking down at the wide table of gods. The final issue remained. The world. The division of it. Hades leaned against one of the marble columns. "Let's not drag this. You know what I want." Poseidon smirked. "You mean the shadows and bones? You sure you don't want something with sunlight?" Hades didn't blink. "I don't need sunlight. I need silence." Zeus nodded. "Fine. You take the underworld. You'll guard the dead, the gates, and the depths." Hades gave a sharp nod. Poseidon crossed his arms. "Then what's left for me? Don't tell me you're handing me lakes and puddles." Zeus raised a brow. "The oceans, brother. Every one of them. Surface to deepest trench." "That's not enough." Zeus frowned. Poseidon stepped forward. "You get the sky. You get the storms. You get Olympus. You sit on the throne. And I swim." Zeus's voice sharpened. "The oceans touch every land. They connect every realm. Don't underestimate what you've been given." Hades stepped between them. "It's not about what we want. It's about what balances the world. I don't care for the sky. I don't care for the sea. I'll take the dead. But if we turn this into ego..." He looked at them both. "The world will rot before it begins." The silence settled like a heavy fog. Zeus exhaled slowly. Then it's done. He raised his hand. With a pulse of divine light, he etched it in the fabric of reality. Zeus, sky and storm, king of Olympus. Poseidon, seas and earthquakes, lord of the oceans. Hades, death and the underworld, keeper of the lost. Their domains sealed. Poseidon grumbled. Next time, I want to vote. Zeus smirked. We'll call it a tie. That night, edge of the old battlefield, Métis sat alone, watching the stars. She heard the footsteps before the voice. You're dangerous. She turned. Hera stood there, arms folded, crown gleaming under the moon. So are you, Métis answered. I thought about poisoning you, Hera said. Métis blinked. Then I thought about isolating you. Making Zeus doubt you. Maybe telling him you plan to control him. You would have wasted your breath. I know. Silence. Then Hera sighed. I'm not angry because you're clever. I'm angry because I wasn't faster. Métis tilted her head. Faster at what? At seeing him first. Métis looked at her. Really looked. And for a moment, her voice softened. You still can, Hera. There's room in the sky. But Hera shook her head. I don't want a space beside him. I want the one you took. Métis stood slowly. Not scared. Not proud. Just honest. Then you'll have to take it from me. They stood like that for a long time. Two queens. One is already chosen. One is still playing the long game. And neither is backing down. Later, Mount Dictys, temple balcony. Zeus leaned over the edge, arms on the railing, watching the moonlight touch the ruins far below. Métis came up behind him, silent. He didn't turn. She's coming for you, he said. I know. You scared? No. He finally looked at her. You sure you want to do this? This world? This crown? Métis smiled, tired but warm. I don't want the crown. Then what? You. He stepped closer. His forehead touched hers. And in the quiet between storms, they stayed. Because they both knew, the war might have ended. But the game? The game had just begun. And Zeus would let them fool themselves. Mount Dictys, temple balcony. The wind moved slower here. Not because the air was thin, but because time, somehow, had slowed just enough to let him breathe. Zeus stood still after Métis walked away, his eyes still on the sky. The stars were clearer than they had been in weeks. Like even the cosmos knew the war was over. But it wasn't peace he was watching for. It was the screen. It blinked into existence before his eyes, invisible to everyone else. No one knew. Not even Métis. Not even the gods. System notification. Main quest completed. The Titanomachi begins. Objective: defeat the 12 Titans and overthrow the rule of Cronus. Rally the Olympians. Check. 6-6 gathered. Secure divine stronghold. Check. Mount Olympus claimed. Gain realm recognition. 1/3. Mortals do not yet revere the new gods. First blood drawn. Check. Cronus wounded by Skybolt. Win conditions met. Cronus must fall. The throne of Olympus must rise. A new age must begin. Failure conditions avoided. X death or submission of all Olympians. X return of the world to Titan rule. The text faded. Another screen appeared, slicker, sharper. The glow behind it felt heavier. Reward acquired. Complete system ascension. System limitations lifted. New paths unlocked. World authority access. You may now influence realm law, fate threads, and mortal myth. Seat of the sky. Absolute authority over weather, storms, lightning, and celestial events. Zeus exhaled. Low and slow. It wasn't just power. This was something else. Authority. Influence. A grip not just over the sky, but over reality itself. The system had changed. It was part of him. His gift. His curse. His tool. And now, it waited. New main quest unlocked. Quest. The Age of Gods objective. establish Olympus as the center of divine order across all realms. Unite or conquer all pantheons and safeguard mortal fate. Requirements: build pantheon seats, 0/12. Gain full realm recognition, 1/3. Rewrite the divine law. Survive the first crisis. Reward: Origin Core Access. Omni-Pantheon Integration Key. Legacy Path Revelation. Failure: Collapse of Olympus. Rise of Forgotten Powers. Zeus closed the screen with a blink. The system never gave too much. Never told him why it worked the way it did. Just what he had to do next. It guided him like a rope through a storm. But now, the rope was coiling around the world. He stepped back from the edge and turned toward the inner temple. A soft voice greeted him from behind a pillar. "You've been staring at the sky for a long time," Métis said. Zeus didn't react. He just looked at her. Eyes calm. Still glowing faintly with the aftermath of lightning. "Just thinking," he said. "About what comes next." He nodded. Métis studied him. She could feel it again, that weight. Something ticking behind his silence. Something vast. She didn't ask. Because she already knew. Zeus had seen something again. Something only he could see. And he wasn't ready to say it out loud. Not yet. Elsewhere, deep hollow of Mount Dictys. Inside the sealed rock of the mountain, the system pulsed quietly. It wasn't just floating code. It was alive. Watching. Recording. Adjusting itself to match Zeus's path. It had grown stronger too. Now that Cronus was sealed and the sky answered to Zeus alone, it began expanding. System evolution triggered. Tier: Celestial Authority System to World Dominion Protocol synchronizing with universal law. Adapting to mythic resonance. Mapping new divine threads. Zeus had no idea what was coming next. But the world was already watching him. And the system? It was just getting started. The deepest part of Tartarus beneath time. Beneath fate. Beneath even death itself. The air down here didn't move. It didn't breathe. It pressed. It was like the world itself was trying to crush everything inside it. And in the heart of that crushing dark, Cronus. Chained. Suspended in a pit that had no walls, only shadows. Shackles forged from fate steel bound his arms and legs. His scythe was gone. His power dimmed. But his eyes still burned like ancient suns. He twisted his neck, chains clinking with each movement, and stared at the two figures in front of him. One stood with quiet sadness. The other, with cold distance. Gaia and Rhea. His mother. His wife. The Titan King sneered. "You think these chains will hold me for long?" His voice echoed through the void, layered with something not entirely natural, like it came from the bones of the world itself. "I am Cronus. The World Reaper. The one who broke Uranus. I took the throne once. I'll take it again." His jaw clenched. "I will escape this pit. I will reclaim my seat as God King. And when I do, I'll grind Olympus into dust beneath my heel." Gaia looked at him without flinching. Her green eyes shimmered like stone soaked in sorrow. "You've always mistaken strength for destiny." Cronus spat. "You made me this way." "I made you a Titan," Gaia said quietly. "Not a monster." Rhea stepped forward now, her golden robes brushing against the floating shards of broken time that orbited the prison. Her gaze held no anger. Only resolve. "You devoured our children. To stop the curse." Cronus snapped. "The prophecy said my downfall would come from one of them." "And you fulfilled it yourself," Rhea said, stepping even closer. "You were never defeated by fate. You were devoured by fear." Cronus yanked against his chains. They groaned. Sparks flew. But they held. "I will rise again," he snarled. "You think your sons can hold me? The moment they show weakness, the moment they slip, I'll return. And this time, I won't hesitate." Gaia didn't blink. Rhea didn't tremble. The two women, Goddess and Titaness, turned to go. "You won't break these chains," Gaia said as her voice trailed off. "They weren't made to hold your body. They were made to hold your will." and as they vanished into the mist, their forms swallowed by the abyss, Cronus screamed after them. Not in pain, but in defiance. And Tartarus listened. Somewhere in that endless black, something stirred. Something older than gods. And it remembered his name. Mount Olympus, just after dawn. The clouds around Olympus still smelled like fresh stone and lightning. The marble columns were newly carved. The gold plating on the throne hall hadn't even dulled. Everything was still new, a kingdom just born from the ashes of war. Zeus stood at the edge of the highest balcony, arms folded, cloak brushing behind him in the breeze. His eyes scanned the skies, not for enemies, but for what came next. Then, caw. The air shifted. A shadow cut through the light. A single black raven, feathers glinting with a faint dark shimmer, circled once overhead and dove down like a spear. Zeus didn't move. The bird landed softly on the balcony rail. Then it opened its beak and vomited a tightly rolled parchment sealed with strange runes. Its eyes, one normal, one glowing faint blue, met Zeus's for a long second. Then it took off again, vanishing into the clouds. Zeus stared at the scroll in his hand. It hummed with magic he didn't recognize. Old. Cold. From another sky. He broke the seal and unrolled it slowly. The handwriting was sharp. Purposeful. To Zeus, king of Olympus, lord of storms, I am Odin, the High One, father of the Aesir, ruler of Asgard. We watched the fall of Cronus. We saw your storm light break the Titan lines. And now, the balance shifts. When one pantheon rises, the others must speak. Come to the all-gathering, where gods meet beyond borders. Time bends for us there. The world shall not notice your absence. But if you ignore this, others won't. Bring no army. Just yourself. The raven has marked you. I await your presence beneath Yggdrasil. Odin. Zeus rolled the scroll close. The runes still faintly pulsed at the edge. He looked toward the far northern horizon. Past oceans. Past stars. Past worlds. Yggdrasil. He muttered. The tree of realms. The axis of gods. The roots that touch every sky. A slow smirk touched the corner of his lips. Interesting. Thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. He turned and walked back into Olympus. Because this time, the gods weren't coming to him. He was going to them. Zeus leaned against the rail, fingers tapping the cold marble as he stared out at the open skies. He had just finished reading the raven's letter again, even though he didn't need to. The words were already burned into his mind. Odin. Are. Amaterasu. He barely knew them. Names that sounded like thunder in different skies. He didn't even know everything about his own myth. His past life memories were blurry, scenes from books, half-remembered lessons, fragments of old games and shows. Faces of gods he hadn't met yet, might never meet. Hermes. Apollo. Artemis. Athena. Ares. Hercules. Dionysus. Perseus. All names that would one day belong to his children. He liked the idea of that. Of being a father. Of watching gods rise that carried pieces of him. Even Kratos crossed his mind, the fictional son from a game he once played. Brutal. Angry. Lost. That one didn't count, of course, but the thought still made him chuckle. He'd definitely kill me, Zeus muttered to himself, smirking. But this wasn't the time for idle thoughts. There were bigger names now. Bigger skies. Ra, Odin, and Amaterasu. Other kings. Other realms. Other realities. He exhaled and turned from the balcony. His feet moved quietly through the golden hallways of Olympus. Pillars cast long shadows across the marble floor as the sun slowly climbed. He knew where she'd be. Olympus. Temple Garden. Métis sat by the water basin, her hand gently skimming the surface. A gentle swirl followed her fingertips, little spirals of blue and silver. She didn't turn when she heard him behind her. You're quiet, she said. I'm thinking, Zeus replied, stopping beside her. You're not good at that, she teased, looking up. Zeus cracked a grin. You'd be surprised. She stood, and he gently took her hand in his. I have to go, he said. Métis tilted her head. Another war. No, Worse. A meeting. That does sound worse. Zeus laughed, but only briefly. A gathering of gods. Odin invited me. Ra and Amaterasu will be there. Others too, I think. Her brow arched. You're not exactly a diplomat. I'll smile, he said. Once. Then I'll let the thunder talk. Métis chuckled softly. You'll be back. Before the moon flips. She leaned forward just slightly. And if it doesn't? I'll make it. He kissed her. Not like a king. Not like a storm. Just simply. As a man. A soft breath. A lingering touch. Her fingers brushed against his cheek as he pulled back. Watch Olympus for me, he said. Métis nodded. It's already watching you. Zeus stepped back. Then he turned, and in the blink of a heartbeat, his body shifted. Feathers exploded outward. Wings spread wide, golden-tipped and massive. His form twisted, surged, and where a mun had stood, now an eagle soared into the air with a screech that echoed through all of Olympus. He rose like a bolt of wind, breaking past the highest tower, his silhouette shrinking against the sky. Métis watched from the garden, arms folded. Her eyes narrowed slightly, because she knew one thing for certain. Whatever waited at this gathering, it wouldn't be just talk. And Zeus, her Zeus, was flying straight into it. Above the Bifrost Vale, crossroad of realms, a crack in the sky formed like stained glass being peeled open. Lightning danced along its edge. Zeus spread his wings, slowed his descent, and passed through the tear. The world shifted. The colors bent. Suddenly, he was no longer in the skies of Earth. He flew through an endless bridge of fractured stars, a swirling corridor of divine energy that pulsed with ancient oaths and unseen wars. This was the place where gods met gods. Not on land. Not in heaven. But in between. The great divine conclave. Divine gathering grounds, realm of concord. Zeus landed hard, feet striking white stone that shimmered like polished bone under starlight. His form reverted in a spark of lightning. Cloak fluttering behind him, golden vambraces on his forearms, no crown, just stormlight in his veins and thunder in his step. A courtyard stood before him, open and endless, surrounded by floating columns that moved with the pulse of the cosmos. Gods were already there. Dozens of them. And 3 stood taller than the rest. Odin, cloaked in ravens and shadow, his single eye glowing with runes older than history. Ra, blazing like a sun wrapped in the shape of a mun, with fire wings trailing behind his back. Amaterasu, graceful and cold as ice, her light not fiery but pure, divine, and unwavering. The sun in stillness. They turned as Zeus approached. He said nothing. Neither did they. Not at first. It was Odin who stepped forward. You came, he said, voice rough like old bark. Zeus shrugged. You sent a bird. It spat on me. I took that personally. Ra chuckled. At least he came with a sense of humor. Amaterasu didn't smile. She simply spoke. The world is changing. Zeus nodded. It tends to do that after a war. You're not the only one who's won a war recently, Odin said. Ra added, and not the only one who has enemies waiting in the dark. Zeus folded his arms. You called me here. Say what you need to say. Odin's one eye glowed brighter. Your titans may have fallen, but their echoes remain. And beyond this world, others are stirring. Divine gathering grounds, realm of concord. The silence hung for a moment, thick, still, electric. Then, the starlight above the courtyard rippled. A new pulse echoed across the space as another figure descended. He moved like a whisper through time. Silent, barefoot, his skin like polished obsidian. Ash swirled around his steps, and 3 glowing lines traced vertically across his forehead. His eyes were half-closed, like he was asleep in a dream he controlled. Shiva. The destroyer. The end and the beginning. He walked without weight. The air bowed around him. Zeus watched him closely. This one didn't burn like Ra or roar like Odin. But something deeper moved under his calm presence. Something ancient. Zeus, Shiva said, voice low, almost melodic. Welcome to the conclave. Zeus gave a measured nod. I take it you're not here for small talk. Shiva smiled faintly. No. But there's peace in knowing who's next to you when the sky turns. He walked past, robes brushing the marble floor, and took his place beside Odin. The gods began to arrive faster now. One by one, figures from mythologies and realms Zeus didn't yet understand stepped through the veils of light that shimmered around the perimeter. A Mun with silver skin and 4 eyes stood near Ra. His robe shimmered with hieroglyphs that shifted constantly. That was Thoth, Ra's scribe and god of wisdom. A woman glowing with emerald flame, her long braids coiled like serpents, stood beside Shiva, Parvati, quiet but sharp-eyed. A tall figure of molten obsidian wrapped in vines emerged next, his voice echoing through the floor as he greeted the others, Obatala, from a realm of spirits and Orisha. From the east, a tiger leather-robed warrior queen stepped in barefoot, lightning dancing in her palms. Nuwa, shaper of mankind, dragon-bodied beneath the waist. And beside her, like a living storm cloud, Susanu, brother of Amaterasu. Wild-haired, thunder-eyed. He gave Zeus a cocky smirk and a nod. Didn't think a sky god from the west would actually show, Susanu said, his voice rough but not mocking. Zeus smirked back. Didn't think I'd be welcomed. You're not, Susanu replied, laughing. But that's part of the fun. Zeus liked him instantly. Soon the ring was full. The gods stood in a wide circle, each a ruler of a realm, each watching the others carefully. The conclave shimmered with tension, but there was no hostility. This wasn't war. This was the board before the game. Odin raised his hand, and the ground itself resonated. All gods of all realms, he said. We are not here for prophecy. Not yet. We are here for presence. For clarity. His eye scanned the circle. Zeus, of Olympus, has overthrown Cronus. The Titanomachy has ended. A throne stands filled. He gestured to the center. Step forward. Zeus took a breath. Then walked. He stood in the center of the circle. The gaze of dozens of gods burned into him. He didn't flinch. Ra spoke first. You crushed the past. What will you do with the future? Zeus raised his chin. Build. Not like the Titans. Not with fear. Amaterasu spoke next. Do your siblings follow? They chose to fight beside me, Zeus said. Not under me. Shiva's gaze softened. Good. The best kings don't beg for loyalty. They create it. A murmur of agreement passed through the gathering. Odin stepped forward again. Your father once came to this place. Arrogant. Loud. Certain of his rule. Zeus smirked. Sounds familiar. Some of the gods chuckled. Even Odin's mouth twitched. But you're not Cronus, Odin said. Zeus's eyes flicked to him. No. I ended Cronus. And with that, the energy in the space shifted. One by one, the gods raised their hands, not in salute, but in acknowledgement. You have earned the seat, Ra said. You are king of the skies, said Amaterasu. May your storms be just, Shiva added. A divine pulse shot through the courtyard. The air glowed faintly. The conclave had acknowledged him. Not just as a king, but as one of them. Zeus exhaled slowly. A quiet nod. Then he stepped back to the edge of the circle. And the conclave resumed. They talked, not of war, not yet, but of order. Of balance. Of what each pantheon planned in this new age. Ra spoke of rebuilding temples scorched by a desert rebellion. Odin mentioned whispers from Jotunheim, giants that stirred uneasily now that Olympus had shifted. Nuwa talked about mortal kind and how their prayers had started bending in new directions. Zeus listened. Absorbing. This wasn't a battlefield. It was something trickier. Power moved here through words, posture, and silence. He felt Métis would have loved it. Eventually, a tall goddess wrapped in twilight veils stepped forward. Her skin shimmered like dusk, her voice like a distant lullaby. She introduced herself as Izanami, ruler of Yomi and queen of the Japanese underworld. She nodded toward Hades's absence. The dead stir, she said. You might need him at the next meeting. Zeus frowned faintly. He doesn't travel well. Susanoo laughed. Neither do most who rule the dead. Obatala turned his gaze toward Zeus. You walk with new weight. You've claimed a sky. But skies stretch far. Zeus didn't flinch. I plan to stretch with them. A few gods gave low, approving murmurs. Eventually, the topics grew lighter. They asked him about Olympus. Its towers. Its people. Shiva leaned closer. Will you remake your world in your image? Zeus shook his head. Yes. I'll remake it in mine. The gods glanced at each other. That answer lingered. Because it wasn't about power. It was about legacy. And whether they liked him or not, they could all see, Zeus was not Cronus. The meeting finally drew toward a close. The stars overhead shimmered into constellations, slowly realigning across realities. Zeus stood once more beside Odin, Ra, and Amaterasu. The eldest three. Odin placed a hand on his shoulder. You held your ground well. Zeus smirked. I've got good boots. Ra's flames flickered. You have our respect. But remember, it doesn't last forever. Every throne shakes eventually. Amaterasu simply looked at him. Speak less next time. The silence speaks more. Zeus gave a small nod. I'll keep that in mind. Then, with a shimmer of space, one by one, the gods began to vanish. Some as fire. Some as mist. Some as whispers into the winds. Zeus turned to leave, wings already beginning to shimmer into form. But he paused, just briefly. Because he knew. This was just the beginning. The gods had met. The skies had shifted. And somewhere far beyond the edge of stars, the next move was already being made. Olympus, temple gardens. The sun hovered lazily over Olympus, draping golden light over the palace roofs and marble paths. The gardens buzzed quietly, a place meant for peace, until now. Métis stood beneath the olive tree by the fountain, arms folded, her expression calm but unreadable. Across from her, Hera's smile was anything but soft. When Zeus returns, Hera said, stepping closer, her golden sandals brushing against the grass, he'll have to choose his queen. And I will be the one he chooses. She tilted her head, green eyes glittering. But don't worry, Métis. I won't take away your right to see him. I'm generous like that. Métis didn't move. She just blinked once. Generous, she said, voice quiet but cutting. You sound confident. I am. Hera grinned wider. You were just a means to an end. A tool to help him rise. But now the throne is real. Olympus is real. The gods are gathering. He needs more than a whispering oracle at his side. He needs presence. Power. A goddess worthy of the heavens. And that's you. Métis asked. Hera raised her chin. Who else? Métis finally stepped forward. Slowly. Deliberate. Her eyes, clear as moonlight, met Hera's. You speak like a queen, Métis said. But you forget something. She stopped, just a step away. Zeus has already chosen. Hera's smile faltered. Métis kept going. And I'm sorry to crush your delusion, but it's not you. It was never going to be you. Hera's fingers twitched at her sides. Métis tilted her head just slightly, her voice still calm. Yes, you'll be one of his women, I don't doubt that. You'll scream and rage and tear apart Olympus until he gives you what you want. And he will, because sometimes giving a storm its space is easier than stopping it. She leaned in. But the queen of the sky? The one who holds his heart before his throne? That's not you. It never will be. Hera's grin cracked. Her breath hitched. And then it twisted. You, because deep down, Métis cut in smoothly, you know he pities you. He sees your need to be worshipped. And it disgusts him. Silence. For half a second, Olympus held its breath. Then, crack. The wind surged. Boom. A column of air exploded outward as Hera snapped. Her eyes flared, her voice became a snarl, and divine energy burst from her skin like wildfire. You smug little witch. She lunged. A pulse of blinding gold tore through the air as she raised her hand to strike Métis across the face, a goddess wrath surging through her veins. But before her fingers landed, the sky screamed. A thunderclap shattered the air. Lightning tore the sky open. And Zeus descended. Like a comet of pure fury, wrapped in arcs of stormlight and raw power, his cloak flared behind him like living storm clouds. Thunder rolled across the heavens as he landed between them, slamming down with a force that cracked the marble beneath his feet. Hera stumbled back. Métis didn't even flinch. Zeus stood tall, electricity crackling across his skin, his golden eyes burning with heat. His gaze shifted once, to Hera. "What do you think you're doing?" he said, voice low and heavy, like the air before a storm. Hera tried to recover, straightening her back. I heard you from the sky," he said. "All of it." That silenced her. Zeus turned slightly, just enough to look at Métis. His face softened. A little. "You all right?" She nodded once. "Fine." Then he turned back to Hera. But this time, there was no softness. Just lightning. "I don't care who you think you are," he said. "But raise your hand against her again and I'll remind you what the Queen of the Sky means." Hera's mouth opened, then shut. Zeus stepped forward, not threatening, decisive. "Métis is not just my wife," he said. "She is Olympus first. The one who stood beside me before any of this was carved from war. The throne exists because of her." A pause. "And yes," he said, voice ringing louder, echoing through Olympus, "she is Queen of the Sky." Hera's hands clenched. Her pride bled from her eyes. But she didn't speak. Not this time. She turned away, fury burning inside her chest like a slow storm, and vanished into the wind. Zeus let out a slow breath. The sky began to calm. The crackling air settled. The storm softened behind his eyes. Métis stepped up beside him. He didn't look at her right away. But she looked at him. And smiled. "I didn't ask you to come down like that," she said softly. He snorted. "You didn't have to." Then he turned, finally meeting her gaze. "Some things I don't let slide." She brushed his arm. "So dramatic." He shrugged. "I'm the god of storms." She leaned in. "And you're mine." He smiled, just a little. And for now, the heavens above Olympus were calm again. But beneath it all, one truth remained: the sky had a queen. And she wasn't going anywhere. The depths of the world, Tartarus. The ocean above was still. But far below, past the reach of light, past the reach of gods, past even the whispers of death, something stirred. A voice rumbled. Low. Ancient. Not just sound, intention. "I guess the gods are also flawed." It echoed through the marrow of the planet. Through bedrock. Through the bones of titans long buried. They seal monsters here like trash. Forgotten. Unwanted. Like I'm some kind of pit, not a primordial. The voice grew louder. "But I am not a prison. I am not their punishment. I am a being." The walls trembled. Chains rattled. Fire surged in the cracks of the abyss. "I am Tartarus." And Tartarus was angry. For too long, the gods had thrown their enemies into his flesh, chained them in his guts, bled them into his rivers of magma, never once asking if he agreed. Titans. Giants. Monsters. Cronus himself. And Tartarus was done. Time to act. A pulse rippled from the center of his being. Like a heartbeat made of molten hate. "I will make something worse than all of them. Something to remind Olympus that depth is deeper than sky. That darkness is older than the storm." He didn't need Gaia's blessing. But he would take it anyway. Deep beneath Gaia's core, where sky never reached, the earth above groaned. Gaia stirred from her slumber. Her presence stretched down to meet him, hesitant. "What do you want, Tartarus?" "Justice," he growled. "Or revenge. What's the difference when they all end up screaming?" Gaia hesitated. "You've been silent for eons." "And you've been betrayed," Tartarus said. "Zeus put your children in me. He put you in chains without touching you." Her silence was all the answer he needed. So Tartarus reached into himself. Into the filth. Into the rage. Into the unspoken. He clawed into his own essence, his primordial flesh, and tore something loose. A core of raw destruction. It pulsed like a second heart. Like something that should not exist. And from it, he began to shape. Birth of Typhon, the curse-made flesh. No wind. No sky. Just screams. The earth cracked open and a shadow with 10,000 limbs surged out like a living nightmare. His legs were snakes that twisted and snapped with their own hunger. His hands ended in claws that could tear the stars. His wings, when they unfolded, blotted out everything. His head split into dragon maws, each one howling a different kind of storm. Plague, fire, poison, thunder, silence. Typhon was not born. He was built. A body forged from Tartarus's own wrath. Eyes forged from the last light of fallen titans. Lungs filled with the black smoke of Gaia's deepest pits. He opened his mouth. And screamed. The sound shattered caverns. It made even the dead stir. Gaia flinched. Her presence recoiled. What have you done? What you couldn't, Tartarus said. You've made a god killer. No, he rumbled. I've made a god's reckoning. And as Typhon rose, rivers boiled. The earth bled. Even Olympus heard it. Above the sky, Mount Olympus trembled. Zeus stood at the balcony, a cup in hand. The sky flickered. Thunder trembled on its own. His brow furrowed. What was that? He muttered. Métis stepped beside him, eyes narrowed. That wasn't thunder. Zeus turned toward the southern horizon. He could feel it now. A presence older than war. A weight crawling up from the edge of reality itself. And in the deepest part of his storm-filled soul, Zeus knew. Something was coming. Something he couldn't reason with. Something that didn't care who wore the crown. Realm of Olympus, midnight silence. The wind howled across the marble halls. Olympus, towering high above the clouds, stood in silence. The stars above flickered like 1,000 silent witnesses watching the divine wheel begin to turn again. Zeus sat on the high throne. Alone. A strange pressure curled around his temples. Then it hit. A sharp ringing sound that wasn't a sound at all, more like a pulse against his very soul. Then, it appeared. A familiar blue shimmer only he could see. System alert, new world event detected. A primordial threat has awakened. Typhon, the abomination of chaos, has been created. Origin, unknown. Power level, classified. Warning, entity exceeds Titan-class threat. Catastrophic danger is imminent. New main quest unlocked. Quest, the monster of monsters. Objective, discover the origin of Typhon. Confront the entity. Prevent Olympus from falling. Bonus objectives, learn the role of Gaia and Tartarus. Decide the fate of the primordial order. Failure condition, Olympus destroyed. Death of the Olympian line. End of the Age of Gods. Reward. Hidden by the system. Primordial access unlocked. Divine right strengthened. Zeus clenched his fists. Lightning sparked from his knuckles. Typhon. That name, he didn't know how, but it made the hairs on his neck stand up. Like something ancient. Wrong. As if it didn't belong in this world. Even Cronus hadn't made the skies tremble like this. He stood. No hesitation. Métis. She'd know what to do. Olympus, upper garden terrace. The breeze rustled the leaves. Moonlight danced on the glassy surface of the divine pool. Métis stood near it, robes drawn around her shoulders, hair falling down her back. She had been thinking, always thinking. Calculating. But even she paused when Zeus appeared behind her, crackling with storm energy. She turned instantly. What happened? Call them, Zeus said. Her brow furrowed. Who? Everyone. The gods. The council. Olympus needs to wake up. Métis blinked. Why? Zeus looked up to the moon. Typhon has been created. The calm in her face cracked. That name. I don't know what it is, Zeus said. But I need answers. And I'm starting with Gaia. The Earth's core, chamber of the Old Mother. Zeus descended like thunder through clouds, then mist, then stone, then magma. The layers of the world peeled away before him like silk being burned by raw lightning. Finally, he stopped. The air down here wasn't like the sky. It wasn't wind. It was pressure. The breath of the earth itself. The chamber was vast, endless roots sprawled along the ceiling, glowing with old, fading green light. In the center, lying weak against a mound of stone, was Gaia, the mother of all. But she looked hollow. Her limbs were cracked. Her skin was like stone riddled with moss veins. Her breath came slowly, like the earth itself groaning in its sleep. Gaia. The name echoed. Her eyelids fluttered. "You've come," she said, voice soft like shifting soil. Zeus stepped forward but didn't kneel. "You made a monster." "Typhon. Why?" Her lips curled slightly, not in defiance, not in pride. "In pain. I didn't." Zeus narrowed his eyes. "The energy I felt said it was you." Gaia chuckled bitterly. "Then your senses are half blind." Zeus paused. "Tartarus." Gaia nodded slowly. "He's tired of being a prison. He sees himself as a god. As a living force, not a garbage pit for your wars. He wanted to shake Olympus. And he knew. I was weak enough to use." She coughed, a bit of glowing sap spilling from the cracks in her arms. "I gave him a seed once, long ago. Meant to heal the lands after the war with Uranus. But he twisted it. Fed it hate. Fed it fire. And now." Her gaze locked with his. "He has a child." Zeus whispered the name again. "Typhon." Mount Olympus, the next morning. The storm clouds circled the peak. Lightning flashed once. Then twice. Then exploded as Zeus returned, cloak billowing, eyes glowing. Métis met him near the base of the throne steps. What did she say? It was Tartarus. The words dropped like stones. He made it using Gaia's power. She was used. Her energy, it's fading. Métis clenched her jaw. Then we're looking at something more dangerous than Cronus ever was. Zeus nodded slowly. He's not just a monster. He turned, eyes scanning the horizon. He's a weapon. The council chamber, later that day. The 12 thrones surrounding the great round table gleamed under divine light. Poseidon was already pacing. Hades sat, quiet. Demeter looked troubled. Hestia, calm as always, stared into the flickering flames in the middle. Then Zeus entered. All turned. There's a new threat, he said plainly. Typhon. The name hit like thunder. Even Hades' eyes narrowed. That name. It's not a titan. Not a god. Not a monster. It's something else. Tartarus made it. Gaia confirmed it. Hestia frowned. Why would Tartarus move now? Zeus answered without blinking. He's tired of being a cage. Now he wants to be a king. The gods murmured. Poseidon slammed his trident into the floor. Then we drown him. Zeus shook his head. This isn't just about Tartarus. It's about the balance. The roots of our world are shifting. And this thing, this Typhon, if we don't stop it, Olympus won't stand another day. Demeter leaned forward. So what's the plan? Zeus looked at each of them. Then said, war. Elsewhere, the abyssal womb of Tartarus darkness churned like boiling oil. And in the middle of it all, something rose. Massive. Twisted. Grotesque. A body shaped by hatred and molten rage. Snake coils for legs. Wings stitched from shadows. Its face half-formed, half-burned into existence by a divine furnace. Typhon. Its first breath was a roar that cracked the underrealm. Tartarus stood before it, tall and formless. Not a man. Not a god. Just an outline in the dark. Rise, he said. Your purpose is simple. Burn Olympus. Break the gods. Make them feel what I felt for eons. Typhon said nothing. but its red eyes opened, and the ground above began to shake. Back in Olympus, Zeus' lone knight returned. The sky above was calm, but Zeus stood alone on the edge of the peak again. The system blinked silently beside him. Quest active, monster of monsters. He stared forward, lightning dancing faintly around his arms. This was no longer about proving himself. Not about thrones. Or bloodlines. This was survival. He whispered, "Let's see what you've got, Tartarus." And the sky rumbled in response. The pit of Tartarus, the wind didn't blow here. Because there was no wind. No time. No sound. No sky. Only pressure. Crushing, ancient pressure that ground mountains to dust and cracked even immortal bones. The realm of Tartarus wasn't made for things that walked. It was made for punishment. For agony. For echoes that screamed without mouths. Yet down the endless throat of that realm came Zeus. He descended like a storm being swallowed. Bolts of divine lightning forked out from his back as his boots struck the invisible floor of Tartarus, each step sending pulses through the blackness like sonar. His cloak fluttered against a wind that didn't exist. His eyes lit the dark. He wasn't hiding. He wanted to be seen. And Tartarus saw him. A rumble came. Low and rising. Not from above, but beneath. A churning quake. A voice with no center, no mouth. It came from every wall, every crack, every grain of this damnable realm. "You dare walk into me again, boy?" Zeus didn't flinch. "I didn't come to ask," he said. His voice echoed back 1,000 times in the void. "I came to warn you." The darkness moved. The shape of Tartarus formed like smoke curving around stone. Towering. Faceless. His body was like a titan forged from shifting bedrock, laced with fire veins that pulsed red. But he didn't step forward. He coiled. Like a serpent. Like something that thought it had already won. A warning. Tartarus hissed. "You bring thunder into the pit of chaos and call it a warning?" Zeus didn't blink. "I know you made Typhon." A long pause. Then, a ripple of laughter. Deep. Mocking. Ancient. "Of course I did." Zeus stepped forward. Lightning cracked at his feet. "You used Gaia's last spark. You twisted her healing into a curse." "She allowed it," Tartarus whispered. "Even if she didn't know it. That's the price of looking away for too long. Her roots are soft. But I do not forget." Zeus's hands twitched. Thunder rolled in his palms. "I'm not here to talk about your pain. I'm here to end your mistake." Tartarus leaned closer. His eyes opened, not eyes, but burning caverns glowing like the pits of dead stars. "Typhon is no mistake." "Then what is he?" "Justice," Tartarus growled. "Vengeance. Your kind built Olympus on the backs of monsters. Cast us down. Buried us. You use the earth like a throne and throw your scraps here. But I am the earth. The core. The unbreakable. I am the cage you cannot escape." Zeus narrowed his eyes. "You think this is revenge? I think this is balance." The sky inside Tartarus cracked above them. Lightning and black flame clashed somewhere in the upper layers, just beyond reach. "Typhon will erase the stain of Olympus," Tartarus said. "One god at a time." Zeus stepped right to the edge of the pit. His lightning flared harder now. A ring of blue arc circled around his body, cutting grooves into the very space around him. "Then let me tell you how this ends," he said, voice rising. "When I'm done with him, there won't be enough left to scatter across the winds. And just like your other failures, I'll throw what remains right back into you." Tartarus roared. The whole realm shook. Fiery geysers erupted from beneath the floor, and the shadows screamed. But Zeus didn't move. He stood in the middle of Tartarus's rage and raised one hand. A spear of lightning formed above him, coiling with divine power, brighter than anything this pit had seen since the age of creation. Tartarus snarled. "You are arrogant, little storm." Cronus said the same things once. So did Uranus. So will you. "I'm not them," Zeus said. "I don't wait. I burn." Then he flung the lightning spear downward. It didn't aim at Tartarus directly, it stabbed into the very foundation of the realm. And when it hit, the entire plane screamed. A blast wave tore through the pit like a divine pulse. Shadows collapsed. Fire snuffed out. Even the formless edges of Tartarus recoiled. Zeus turned his back. "I'll be back," he said, walking upward into the rising stormlight around him. "Try not to choke on your pride before then." And just like that, he vanished, rising through a golden bolt of lightning that shredded the silence in his wake. Back in Olympus, the skies above Olympus weren't calm anymore. Black clouds gathered around the peak, but they weren't natural. They were gathered, summoned by Zeus's will. The gods below stood ready. Poseidon summoned whirlpools beneath the base of the mountain, his trident glowing with sea foam and blue sparks. Hades arrived from the underworld, shadows coiling behind him like a living cloak. He said nothing, but the souls that stirred in his wake whispered prayers not even the living dared speak. Demeter raised walls of vines and roots, her eyes dark with worry, but her stance strong. Hestia lit the great flame of Olympus itself. And Zeus returned. He landed in a crack of thunder, standing at the center of the courtyard, his body still glowing faintly with the essence of Tartarus. "They're coming," he said. "Then we'll meet them," Poseidon growled. "No," Zeus said. "I'll meet them." The others froze. "I'm the one he wants," Zeus continued. "Tartarus didn't create Typhon to destroy you. He created him to destroy me, to unmake the God King." Hades finally spoke. "Then what do we do?" Zeus looked at all of them. His gaze was sharp. "Alive. You hold Olympus." He turned toward the edge of the mountain, where the horizon cracked with red lightning in the far south. "I'll hold the storm." And then, he vanished once more. Elsewhere the lands beyond mortal vision split open. Mountains broke like cracked teeth. Oceans parted like scarred veins. And from the abyss crawled Typhon. His body was larger than the tallest peaks, his wings dragging shadows across continents. His voice wasn't a roar. It was a curse. Every flap of his wings killed the stars above him for miles. The world beneath him trembled. "Olympus," he growled. Then he walked. Every step, a quake. Every breath, a promise of destruction. And overhead, a crack of lightning. Zeus. Descending fast. No words. Just thunder. Just war. Battle of gods, Olympus versus chaos. A crack split the skies. The air turned heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. From above, Zeus came down in a streak of raw lightning, his body burning blue and white, fists clenched, cloak tearing behind him like a banner made of storms. Below him, Typhon moved. The monster of monsters. His body towered beyond mountains. Coiled legs like serpents writhed under him, crushing forests and entire valleys with each shift. 100 heads slithered from his shoulders, each hissing a different curse. Wings wide enough to darken nations unfolded as he raised his burning arms to the heavens. Zeus. Typhon roared, his voice shaking clouds into ash. Zeus didn't respond with words. He landed. The ground cracked open beneath his feet. A thunderclap followed a second later, loud enough to rupture the sky. His eyes locked with Typhon's. Lightning danced along his arms, arching into the heavens above him. The ground beneath him trembled. The air sparked. Lightning flicker, level 6, electricity bled from his every step. With one stride, he vanished, reappearing above Typhon's left shoulder, his body spinning midair like a divine spear. Smash! He slammed a bolt-charged fist into one of the serpent heads. It exploded in a burst of light and blood. A roar followed, angrier, deeper. Thundershout, level 5, Zeus clapped both hands forward. The air warped, and then detonated. A wall of pure thunder tore through Typhon's chest, blasting him backward and knocking over several mountains behind him like dominoes. But Typhon wasn't done. He snapped back up, roaring as more heads grew from the ruined stump, even more furious. His claws slashed across the air. Flames, darkness, acid, and wind came together in one attack. Boom! Zeus blurred away. Ether step, level 3. He vanished in a blink, teleporting through a lightning vein in the sky, and then reappearing right at Typhon's neck. Fall. Smite, level 4. From the clouds above, Divine plasma streaked down like judgment. 5 bolts. Then 10. Then 20. Each impact carved craters across Typhon's body, burning scales, tearing limbs, and turning entire heads into smoking meat. But Typhon didn't scream. He laughed. Then moved. Faster than something that big should. One of his serpent tails whipped out, catching Zeus midair. Crack! The impact sent Zeus flying. He smashed through 3 ridges, bounced across a frozen lake, and crashed into a cliff wall. Blood trickled from his lips. His breathing was rough. The divine aura around him flickered for a moment. Then, system upgrade, in battle growth triggered. Lightning flicker, level 7, ascended, passive discharge now shreds divine shields. Movement speed has doubled. Reflexes elevated to light level bursts. Zeus stood up. Lightning exploded outward from his body in every direction. The cliff behind him shattered into dust. He raised his arms to the sky. "You want war?" he shouted. The sky answered. Stormcaller's Wrath, level 2 to level 4, a vortex formed high above. A divine hurricane spiraled into existence, fueled by Olympus's raw power. Thunder, ice, wind, and fire, every element surged inside the storm, reacting to Typhon's many weaknesses. Zeus held out his hands. The gauntlets on his arms, Skybreaker gauntlets, glowed brighter than the sun. He slammed both fists together. The storm fell. A massive beam of destruction slammed into Typhon, pushing him back. He roared as his wings caught fire. His arms melted. His flesh boiled and cracked. He reached out and grabbed the storm. Typhon's arms flexed. He absorbed the energy. His mouth opened, vomiting fire and darkness back into the sky. "You think lightning can destroy chaos?" he bellowed. Then he punched the ground. Kaboom! A shockwave split the earth. A wave of molten chaos spread like a plague, tearing forests and mountains apart as it rushed toward Zeus. Zeus gritted his teeth. Blood dripped from his side. His vision blurred. But he didn't fall. Instead, Divine Presence, Storm Crown, level 1 to level 3, the aura field now disrupts lesser divine magic. Causes instability in monsters born from primordial chaos. He stepped forward, walking straight into the oncoming wave. The moment it touched him, it broke. The aura around him grew wider. His eyes now glowed so brightly, they left trails as he moved. Ether Step, level 3 to level 5, can now chain blinks. Can punch through enemy space with coordinated strikes. Zeus vanished again. Then appeared above Typhon's heart, if the beast even had one. "For Olympus!" he shouted. A spear of divine lightning, 5 times longer than before, formed in his hands. He plunged it downward. Boom! The explosion sent both of them crashing into the crust of the earth. A crater the size of a valley opened, swallowing lakes and forests around it. Zeus coughed violently. One of his ribs cracked. His shoulder was dislocated. Typhon rose from the crater, wounded, but not dead. He raised a hand, then slammed Zeus into the ground with a gravity crush. Zeus hit the stone hard. He didn't get up. Blood spread beneath him. Typhon loomed over him. His shadow covered all. "I win," the beast declared. But the sky rumbled again. Zeus's hand twitched. His body sparked. Smite, level 4 to level 6, divine tier. The storm above exploded. A single, golden bolt fell. It hit Zeus's chest, on purpose. And Zeus rose. Eyes burning gold. Hair now flaring like fire. His injuries sealed. His body thrummed with divine overload. "Not yet," he whispered. He flew. His body streaked into Typhon's chin with enough force to lift the beast into the sky. Then he blinked again, Ether Step. Lightning flicker. Thunder shout. Smite. A combo of god-tier techniques. He ripped across Typhon's body in 10 places at once, each strike tearing skin, bone, and chaos energy apart. Typhon tried to scream, but Zeus punched him in the throat, cutting it off. Then, one final move. Stormcaller's Wrath, level 4 to level 6, Heavenfall mode. He called everything. All the storm. All the sky. A god bomb wrapped in clouds and judgment. He hurled it down. Typhon raised his arms. No. Boom. The world went white. When the smoke cleared, the crater was miles wide. Typhon lay there, half buried, body broken, blood pouring like rivers. Zeus floated above, burning, breathing, alive, but barely. He descended slowly, landing beside the monster, and said, "When I said I'd throw what's left of you back into Tartarus, I meant it." The pit of Tartarus, hours after Typhon's fall. The darkness of Tartarus curled and pulsed like a wounded beast. The air was heavier than usual, like something massive had screamed and the echo never left. Then, a new pulse. A golden portal twisted open. Through it stepped Hera. Her robes glowed faintly, her sandals barely touched the scorched stone floor. Behind her floated the massive, charred corpse of Typhon, twisted and broken, what was left of him after Zeus's final storm. Blood still oozed from the shattered ribs. Black ichor dripped from the limp serpent heads. Hera's expression was unreadable. Calm. Maybe too calm. She stood still for a moment, letting the silence throb around her like a drumbeat. Then, without flinching, she raised one hand. Typhon's corpse slammed to the floor of Tartarus like thunder striking the spine of the underworld. It echoed everywhere. Then, slowly, she said, "I brought this to you. Courtesy of Zeus." She tilted her head slightly, her tone dry, almost mocking. "He said he was going to dump it back here. And..." She looked around the endless dark. "He told me to pass along a message." She stepped forward. Her heels clacked against the smooth black stone. He said, "If you want something done, get it done yourself." The silence didn't last. It boiled. The shadows surged. The floor cracked. And then, Tartarus rose. Not in a single form. Not as a mun. Not as a god. He erupted like smoke and stone, a shifting monolith of rage. Molten cracks bled fire through his chest. His voice didn't echo, it crushed. "Zeus." His scream was thunder without sound. It rattled Hera's bones. Her lungs locked for a moment. Her shield spell cracked on her shoulders. Then suddenly, the entire realm of Tartarus squeezed inward. Hera gasped. Her body was lifted into the air. Not physically, but like pressure itself had become hands. Tartarus suffocated her with presence. "You dare bring me my failure," he growled. "You dare speak in his name, in my domain?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. Her throat was tight. Her eyes watered. Her barrier shattered. The black stone beneath her split. Her feet dangled, and her hands sparked with golden magic trying to resist, but Tartarus was everywhere. "You think I care for your theatrics? For your smugness? You think I need more reminders that the gods above still spit on me? Enough." She couldn't breathe. Her chest cracked. Then, she smiled. Even in pain. Even choking. And through clenched teeth, she whispered, "But what if I help you burn him?" The pressure froze. Tartarus paused. His shadow tendrils coiled tighter for a second. Then looser. Then gone. Hera fell to the floor on her knees, coughing violently, magic flaring from her lungs just to stay conscious. The pressure around her retreated like a beast reeling back from its prey, unsure whether it should kill or listen. Tartarus's voice returned. Quieter. But colder. "Speak." Hera wiped blood from her lip. Stood slowly. Looked up. "I'm not loyal to Zeus. I'm tired of watching him do whatever he wants. Tired of being cast aside." Tartarus didn't answer. She stepped forward. Her voice steadier now. "You made Typhon to crush Olympus. And he nearly did. But Zeus, he always wins because people follow him. They believe he's the center of everything." Her eyes glinted. "I'm telling you, we change that." She raised her hand, golden runes pulsing across her wrist. "I have a plan. But you have to trust me." "Why?" Tartarus asked. "Why betray your king?" Hera's smile returned, bitter this time. "Dark. Because I was never his queen." She turned slightly, flicking Typhon's broken body behind her with magic like a discarded scroll. I don't want Olympus destroyed. I want it rewritten. Tartarus stayed quiet. The shadows shifted. You think your monsters are enough? Hera continued. They're not. Zeus is adapting. Growing. The more you fight him head-on, the stronger he becomes. You've seen it. She walked slowly in a circle, like a strategist mapping terrain. But from within? From the throne? From influence? She turned and faced him fully. I can give you that. Tartarus's form shrank slightly, coiled around itself, studying her, measuring her heartbeat. Oh, what do you propose? Hera's magic flared. I feed him a vision. A warning of a war across realms. Something bigger than Typhon. He'll panic. Gather gods. Grow desperate. Tartarus's shadows listened. Hera leaned in. And in his desperation, I give him a gift. A son. Tartarus tilted his featureless head. A son, he echoed. Yes, Hera said. A child made with your power. Not entirely divine. Not entirely monstrous. Something in between. Something made to live in Olympus, and one day tear it from the inside. The silence after that stretched. Then, Tartarus laughed. Slow, dark, and rising. You would raise a child of Tartarus in the home of the gods. I would raise a god of chaos in a temple of order, she corrected. And I would do it smiling. Tartarus leaned close. The heat behind his voice returned. You lie. But I believe you. Hera smiled again. Then let's make a deal. The shadows circled her hand. And Tartarus reached forward. Their fingers met. The pact was made. And Olympus would never be the same. The storm had gone quiet. Outside, Olympus still shivered with the memory of Typhon's fall. Cracks scarred the golden tiles. The divine winds had not yet returned to their calm. But inside the king's private chamber, all was silent. Zeus lay on a marble bed carved from a single piece of cloud-tempered stone. The edges were lined with silver sigils glowing faintly with a healing aura. His chest rose and fell slowly, deeply. Every breath rasped like thunder slowed to a whisper. His right shoulder was wrapped in divine cloth. Burnt skin shimmered underneath. His ribs had barely reformed. Typhon's last strike had been brutal. The monster had bitten into the sky itself, and Zeus had stood in the middle of it. Now he was still. Stripped of armor. Shirtless. Pale lightning veins flickered across his torso as the healing spells knitted him back together. Beside him sat Métis. Her hands glowed with soft blue light as she pressed her palms gently against his temples. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken in hours. Instead, she let the silence wrap around them like a blanket. The kind of silence that says, "You survived." That's enough for now. She dipped her fingers into a small basin beside the bed, filled with ichor-stained water and crushed ambrosia petals, and dabbed his forehead. Zeus stirred slightly. Eyes fluttered. Then opened. You're here, he murmured. I never left, Métis said softly. Zeus groaned faintly, shifting against the bed. How long? 3 days. He blinked slowly. Did I win? Métis gave him a look. Barely. Zeus smiled faintly. That's still a win. She sighed, placing a hand over his chest. You're a fool. You always go too far. You sound like Poseidon. I sound like someone who's tired of dragging you back from the edge. He didn't answer right away. He looked at her hand over his chest, then up at her eyes. There was something unreadable in them. Something distant. Métis. The deep paths of the underworld Hades walked slowly, his steps echoing along the silent obsidian corridor. Faint pale blue ghost lights flickered on either side, casting long shadows across his sharp features. In his hand, he spun a small black coin between his fingers, its clink the only sound besides the faraway weeping of souls. Ahead of him, Hera emerged from the darkness. She moved quickly, her robe swirling behind her like dark clouds. But she stopped when she saw him leaning against the carved basalt wall, arms folded, his dark eyes unblinking. Hera, Hades said, voice low and even. She didn't speak. just stared at him with that cold, regal glare. The same one she used on the other gods when they stepped out of line. Hades pushed off the wall, walked forward, and stopped just a few feet away. His gaze flickered to the lingering shadows behind her, then back to her face. "You know plotting against Zeus won't work in your favor," he said, quiet but sharp. "You of all people should know that." She said nothing, her jaw tight. Hades tilted his head, studying her like a creature he couldn't quite name. "Zeus stood against Cronus, and lived," he continued. "None of us could have done that. Not you. Not Poseidon. Not even me." His thumb pressed against the black coin. It spun faster. "Why do you think I chose the underworld and not the sky? Why didn't I challenge him for Olympus?" Hera's eyes narrowed. "Because you lack ambition." Hades chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No. Because I understand reality." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so it was just between them, even in the silence of the dead. "Zeus will always win, one way or another. He was born to win. Born to conquer. Even Cronus couldn't bury him. So I took the next best option." He gestured around them with a sweep of his pale hand. The endless black halls. The mournful lights. The silent throng of souls drifting far beyond sight. "The gloomy underworld," he finished. "Here, I reign over death itself. Over the end of all things. It's not Olympus, no. But its power, and its peace." He flicked the coin into the darkness. It vanished without a sound. "And it's the closest I can be to Father," he said softly, eyes darkening as he looked past her. "To Cronus. To see him, chained and broken in Tartarus, whenever I want. It reminds me that even kings fall." Hera's lips curled, but not into a smile. "Zeus will fall," she whispered. "I will make sure of it." Hades raised an eyebrow. For a moment, there was almost pity in his gaze. "You keep telling yourself that," he said quietly. "But when it comes to him, gods don't decide fate." He turned from her, his black robes whispering against the cold floor as he walked away. Only his final words drifted back through the dark. "Fate decides gods." Hera watched him disappear into the deeper halls. Her fists clenched at her side. The flickering ghost lights danced against her knuckles, painting them gold, then blue, then black. She stood there alone for a long time, listening to the whispers of the dead. And in the silence, her resolve only grew colder. The deepest hall, beyond the gates of regret, Hades walked until Hera's presence faded behind him, until the flickering ghost lights thinned into utter darkness. Only here did he stop, in a silent stretch of corridor where even the souls dared not drift. He stood still, feeling the cold bite against his skin. The shadows pressed close like an old cloak he'd worn forever. He closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the smooth basalt wall. The echoes of their conversation replayed quietly in his mind. "Zeus will fall. I will make sure of it." Hades let out a long breath, fogging the silent air. For a moment, his usual calm cracked at the edges, just enough to show what lay beneath: the old grief, the ancient tiredness. His fingers brushed the empty coin pouch at his hip. "Always the same with her," he murmured to the dark. His voice was quiet, carrying no judgment, just a simple weary truth. "She doesn't understand what happens when you push a storm." He tilted his head slightly, eyes half closed, staring into nothing. "Zeus isn't perfect. None of us are. But he is what he is. The sky doesn't bow, and it doesn't break. It just stays." He pushed off the wall, letting his fingertips trace the carved symbols that lined the stone. Old prayers. Forgotten names. Hades sighed, the sound low and honest. "I hope she listens." His voice trembled at the end, almost imperceptibly, but it did. Because in this place of silence, stripped of thrones and titles and crowns, there was only truth. He walked on, the hem of his black robes dragging softly over the cold floor. Far behind him, the ghost lights flickered once more before dying back into stillness. Olympus, dawn over marble towers. The sky above Olympus was soft with the early light. The gold plating on the halls glowed faintly, catching the rising sun's warmth. Cool wind swept through the temple gardens, stirring the quiet olive trees. Métis walked down the long corridor, her sandals whispering against polished marble. Her robes were tidy, every fold neat, and her hair was pinned elegantly behind her head. She looked composed as always, calm, poised, and regal without effort. She paused at the doorway of Zeus's chamber. Inside, he still slept on the vast ivory bed, chest rising and falling with slow breaths. Even in sleep, his presence filled the room like thunder waiting to rumble. Sparks of static curled off his arms now and then, dissipating harmlessly into the silken sheets. Métis watched him quietly for a moment, her expression softening. She didn't smile, but her eyes carried something warmer than any smile could show. Then she turned and stepped out into the hallway. The door closed behind her with a gentle thud. She walked down the balcony steps into the outer gardens, feeling the morning breeze wrap around her like a silk veil. It smelled of pines and mountain winds, tinged faintly with storm. Her gaze turned east, where Hera's temple stood at the far end of Olympus, silent and imposing with its carved pillars and eternal braziers. She knew Hera was up to something. Hera was always calculating, her mind moving in quiet, ruthless steps. It was her nature, pride twisted with envy, ambition hidden beneath careful dignity. Métis was not afraid. Not truly. She knew the future as clearly as she knew her own heartbeat. Zeus would marry Hera. That was fate. But the throne of the Queen of Olympus? That was hers. Still, there was an unease in her chest. A whisper of instinct that even wisdom couldn't silence. Hera was dangerous. Not because she was strong, but because she was willing to do anything. Anything. Métis folded her hands calmly, feeling the cool marble rail beneath her fingertips as she looked out across the floating city of gods. The wind tugged at her hair, but she didn't move to fix it. "I won't lose," she whispered to herself, voice low and certain. Not to her. But even as she said it, a faint chill ran through her veins. Because deep down, beneath the calm, beneath the wisdom, beneath the certainty, she knew Hera was thinking the exact same thing. And Hera would never accept being second. Métis closed her eyes briefly, feeling the morning sun warm her face. Then she opened them again, sharp and clear. Whatever was coming, she would be ready. Olympus, morning winds and marble secrets. Hera stepped through the golden archway at the entrance of Olympus. The dawnlight caught her robes, painting them with soft reds and deep purples as she walked forward with her head held high. Every step echoed with quiet authority. No one dared greet her. They simply bowed low as she passed, their eyes lowered to the polished marble floor. The mission was done. Typhon's broken corpse lay rotting back in Tartarus. She had spoken with the ancient prison itself, and her words still tasted bitter on her tongue. But none of that showed on her face. Her expression was smooth, calm, and commanding. As she moved through the long halls of Olympus, she caught flickers of conversation among the lesser gods and nymphs standing near the columns, their whispers fluttering like moth wings. Métis is always near him these days. The queen must be wise. Métis is wisdom itself. Zeus has already chosen. She sits with him even in council. The others only watch. Hera's footsteps slowed just a fraction. The air around her remained still, but inside her chest something coiled tight, like a waking serpent. Her fingers clenched around the golden sash at her waist. She didn't pause or look at them. Their whispers fell silent the moment they sensed her attention shift their way. Eyes dropped quickly, shoulders tensed, breath held. She continued walking. The stone under her sandals felt colder now. Métis. Of course it was her. Always calm, always graceful, always just there, at Zeus's side. She had been patient and clever, playing the long game. And everyone saw it. Even these gossiping little shadows. Queen of Olympus. The thought burned her. She could feel it smoldering under her ribs, a quiet anger she kept hidden behind her lashes. Hera's steps quickened. The long train of her robes whispered behind her like a hunting snake as she ascended the wide staircase toward Zeus's chambers. She stopped at the carved silver doors. For a moment, she closed her eyes. Breathed in. Out. The anger dulled, replaced by something colder. Something sharper. This isn't over, she told herself. Métis can sit beside him as much as she likes. But there is only one queen. And Olympus will remember my name, not hers. She lifted her chin, eyes steady as the guards opened the doors for her. Inside, Zeus rested against the pillows, awake but unmoving, eyes half closed as he listened to the wind outside. His chest was still bandaged from the fight with Typhon. Thunder crackled faintly under his skin, like lightning trapped beneath flesh. He turned his head as Hera entered. For a second, the faintest flicker of relief crossed his face, so brief it almost wasn't there. Then he nodded. "Hera," he rumbled softly. His voice was low, a little rough from exhaustion, but still carried that undeniable weight of command. "You've returned." She bowed low, letting her hair fall forward like a dark curtain before rising again with measured grace. "My king," she said. "The mission was successful. Typhon has been returned to Tartarus, where he belongs." Zeus's gaze sharpened at that, his golden eyes meeting hers fully for the first time. "And Tartarus himself?" he asked. Hera paused. The memory of Tartarus's crushing presence pressed at her throat for an instant, but she swallowed it down and kept her expression serene. "He is displeased, but contained. For now." Zeus nodded once, slow and thoughtful. Sparks danced faintly across his shoulders before fading. "Good. You've done well." Something in her chest tightened again. "You've done well." Praise, but not intimacy. Not closeness. Not hers. She smiled softly regardless. A smile perfectly practiced. "I serve Olympus," she said. Zeus closed his eyes, exhaling slowly, leaning back into the pillows as thunder rolled faintly outside. Hera watched him for a moment longer, her eyes lingering on the soft flicker of his heartbeat beneath the bronze skin of his throat. Métis may be his mind, she thought, her smile fading as her eyes turned cold again, but I will be his storm. Then, quietly, she turned and left the chamber. The doors closed behind her with a whispering thud, echoing through the marble halls of Olympus as the morning wind rose, carrying secrets between its silent currents. Zeus watched as Hera's silhouette faded beyond the closing doors. The soft thud of polished wood echoed through his chambers, leaving only silence in its wake. He lay back against the mountain of ivory pillows, exhaling a slow, tired breath. His eyes drifted to the ceiling, where thin golden carvings of lightning branched out above him like frozen veins. Sparks danced across his fingers as he thought. In the old stories, she's supposed to be queen. It was true. He knew enough of those distant myths to recall her place by his side, her name woven with his in worship halls and prayers yet to be spoken. Hera, the queen of Olympus, mother of gods, and goddess of marriage and fidelity. But stories were just that. Stories. His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with a weary understanding. Hera. She was strong. Unbending. Her beauty was undeniable, her mind sharp, and her will relentless. All the qualities a queen should possess. But, her heart. Zeus closed his eyes, feeling the storm within him quiet to a low rumble. It wasn't that he didn't love her. He did, in his own way. There was admiration there. Desire. Even respect for her strength. But love needed room to breathe. Hera's love was a chain. Beautiful, golden, unbreakable. But a chain nonetheless. She wouldn't let him live as himself. Not fully. Not as Zeus, king of storms, father of gods, lover of the world's beauty in all its shapes. Her jealousy would choke him until he was nothing but a caged thunder, roaring behind marble walls while she smiled at the world. His hand curled around the blanket covering his waist, sparks crackling softly between his fingers. But Métis. His thoughts softened. Métis, with her quiet wisdom. Her patience. Her eyes that saw everything and judged nothing. She didn't need to chain him to keep him close. She simply stayed. And in her staying, he found peace. She knew his flaws. His wandering eyes, his hunger for life, and his unquenchable thirst for power and affection alike. And yet she remained calm, never nagging, never scorning. As long as his love was true to her at its core, she would not clip his wings. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Small. Almost sad. If only the world saw her the way I do, he thought. He let his head fall back against the pillows, his gaze softening with sleep as dawn light began to pour through the balcony curtains, casting warm gold across his bare chest. In the quiet, he whispered to himself, a confession no one would ever hear. I just want to live as Zeus. And as sleep finally claimed him, the storm inside fell silent, resting under the calm wisdom of a woman who would never need to call herself queen to hold his throne within her hands. Olympus. Hera walked through the gardens of Olympus with careful grace. Olive branches swayed overhead, their silver-green leaves rustling softly in the mountain breeze. She let her fingertips brush against them as she passed, her face calm and composed. But inside, her thoughts were coiling tighter with each step. She had seen Zeus's eyes just now. The way they flickered with gratitude, but not love. The way his praise landed shallow, never sinking deep enough to touch her heart. She felt it like cold water pouring down her spine. Praise without intimacy. Acceptance without devotion. She hated it. She paused by a marble fountain carved with scenes of old wars. Water spilled gently over the rim, catching the sun in soft flashes. Hera looked down at her reflection. The flawless face. The dark hair was pinned in elegant coils. The eyes that had made countless gods and men flinch from their sharpness. A queen's face. But not his queen. Her hand clenched against the fountain's edge, nails biting into the cold stone. She closed her eyes, drawing a long, measured breath. When she opened them again, they were calm, the storm behind them hidden once more. If fate made Métis his queen, she thought, then fate must be persuaded. She turned swiftly, robe sweeping behind her like a violet storm. Her sandals clicked across the mosaic paths as she walked back through Olympus, passing nymphs and minor gods who bowed deeply, not daring to meet her gaze. Their deference meant nothing to her today. Only one thing mattered now. The loom of fate. The temple of the Moirai, edge of the world beyond the halls of Olympus, past the sky's highest vaults and into the silent realm where light did not shine nor shadow dared gather, stood a temple carved into nothingness itself. 3 thrones sat there in a circle. No walls. No ceiling. Just a great endless dark, lit by the soft silver glow of the loom of fate. Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos. The sisters. They worked silently, as they always had. Clotho's spindle spun the threads, bright as starlight. Lachesis's rod measured them, marking length and weight with eyes that saw no illusions. Atropos's shears gleamed dark as obsidian, her fingers poised in a patient promise. Hera stepped forward, her sandals silent on the invisible floor. Her heart thudded once in her chest, heavy as iron, before she spoke. Great Moirai. They didn't look up. Their hands never paused in their work. Threads stretched and looped between them in glittering rivers of fate, weaving the lives of mortals, gods, and monsters alike into one silent, inescapable tapestry. Hera bowed deeply. I seek counsel. Clotho's spindle hummed, but she did not speak. It was Lachesis who answered, her voice a soft, hollow chime. What do you seek, Queen of Olympus? Hera felt the flicker of bitter laughter in her chest at those words. Queen of Olympus. A title she wore in name alone. She swallowed it down and raised her head. I seek guidance, she said carefully. On Zeus. On Métis. Atropos's shears clicked once, a sharp metallic note that cut through the silent dark. What guidance do you seek? She asked, her voice as still as the grave. Hera took a slow breath. Will he ever make me his true queen? Will Olympus ever be mine to rule beside him, alone? The sisters paused their work for the first time. They turned to her as one. 3 faces, ageless and cold, eyes glowing with that silent knowing that saw the marrow of the world. Clotho spoke, her voice echoing softly like a loom's song. The threads of love are woven with choice. Lachesis continued, the threads of fate are woven with law. Atropos finished, her shears clicking gently. But the threads of power are woven with sacrifice. Hera's brow furrowed. What does that mean? Clotho's pale lips curved faintly. If you wish to cut Métis from his side, you must cut something of yourself in return. Lachesis's rod hovered over a single glowing thread, golden and thick, pulsing with divine light. Zeus's life is long. His loves are many. His loyalty, rare. Atropos's shears shifted closer to the thread but did not cut. Remove wisdom, and the king becomes blind. Blind kings trust their queens. Hera's heart quickened. Are you saying I should remove her? Clotho tilted her head. Fate does not command. It shows paths. Lachesis measured again. One path ends in your rule. One ends in your ruin. Atropos clicked her shears softly. Both require sacrifice. Hera stood silent, feeling the words coil around her like snakes of cold iron. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. She bowed her head deeply. Thank you, great Morai. She turned away, her robe sweeping softly behind her. As she stepped back into the world of light, the temple vanished behind her like a dream dissolving at dawn. The edge of Olympus. Twilight. Hera stood at the outermost balcony, watching the sun sink into the western horizon. The sky blazed in crimson and gold, the colors reflecting in her eyes like war paint. The wind tangled her hair around her face, but she didn't move to smooth it back. Remove wisdom. She could hear their voices still, whispering at the edge of her thoughts. Sacrifice for power. A queen for a queen. She closed her eyes, feeling the breeze brush against her skin like a silent promise. I will rule beside him, she whispered to the dying sun. No matter what I must do. As darkness fell over Olympus, Hera turned back towards the glowing halls. Her footsteps were quiet, her gaze calm, and her mind a silent storm waiting to break. She walked with a new resolve, her heart cold with purpose. Because she knew, now more than ever, in the game of gods, mercy was a weakness. And Hera would never be weak again. Olympus, night of quiet storm, Zeus lay on the wide marble bed, one arm draped over his eyes to block out the flickering light of the braziers lining his chamber walls. The soft scent of olive oil and smoldering cedar drifted through the still air. Outside, the wind howled faintly around Olympus's golden towers, rattling the bronze shields hung as offerings on the temple walls. He could feel sleep pulling at him, trying to drag him down into its gentle dark. But his mind refused to be still. The storm inside was always awake, even when his body was worn thin. A soft chime, deep in his chest. Then a familiar blue shimmer blinked into existence in his vision, invisible to all but him. System alert. The flickering text expanded, glowing softly against the shadows of the ceiling. Main quest completed. Quest: The Monster of Monsters. Status: Success. Zeus exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease, if only slightly. Typhon. The name alone still sent faint chills down his spine. He had faced titans, fought monsters, wrestled gods and stormed citadels. But Typhon had been something else entirely. Something ancient. Something wrong. The system flickered again, pulling his eyes back to the blue text. Reward acquired, primordial access, Tier 1 unlocked, divine right strengthened, new skill unlocked, Worldbreaker strike, level 1. Zeus narrowed his eyes at the glowing words. Worldbreaker strike. He murmured to the silent room. The name felt heavy on his tongue. Dangerous. He focused, and another line of text unfurled. Worldbreaker strike, level 1. Allows the user to channel the combined power of their divine authority and the primordial core to deliver a single attack capable of fracturing the boundaries between realms. Usage is limited. Excessive use risks destabilizing personal divinity and the immediate fabric of reality. His chest rose and fell slowly as he read. Lightning flickered faintly across his fingertips, crackling in small arcs that kissed the sheets and vanished. So, it was as it sounded. A weapon of absolute destruction. But not one to wield lightly. He could almost hear Metissa's voice in his mind, calm and soft. Be careful with power that can break the world. You still need the world to rule, my love. He smiled faintly at the imagined memory. It faded quickly as another set of notifications scrolled into view. Primordial access, Tier 1. The user may now perceive and partially influence the flows of primordial energy threading the base of the world. Current access, 4%. Zeus closed his eyes, feeling the meaning settle into him. Primordial energy. The stuff that came before titans. Before gods. The raw essence of existence itself, older even than Gaia and Uranus, older than Cronus's reign. He didn't fully understand it yet. But he felt it. Like faint silver threads vibrating beneath his senses. The roots of reality. If he focused, he could almost see them, lines running through the marble floor, through the air, through the veins of his own body like hidden rivers of light. The final line blinked softly. Divine right strengthened. He knew what that meant. The unspoken law of power. Every god had divine right, the unassailable authority granted to them by their domain. By defeating Typhon, a threat even the Titans feared, his divine right as king of Olympus had solidified further. His commands would weigh heavier. His storms would roar louder. Even his mere presence would press harder against those beneath him, divine or mortal alike. And with that strength came certainty. His people would bow deeper. His enemies would think twice before testing him. His allies would cling closer to his protection. Zeus exhaled again, slower this time. His fingers traced the edge of the blanket as the text faded from his vision, dissolving back into the hidden system that only he could see. He felt tired. Not just from battle, but from knowing what this power meant. What it demanded of him. Strength without limit was a lie. There was always a price. Even gods bled for what they claimed. A faint flicker of golden light drew his eyes sideways. Métis stood at the doorway, framed in the glow of the hallway torches. Her robe was simple today, pale cream tied with a thin bronze sash. Her hair, pinned up for council earlier, now fell in dark waves down her shoulders. She looked at him with that quiet, measuring gaze that stripped away all crowns and thrones. He didn't speak. Just watched her. She stepped forward, her sandals whispering across the marble, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her cool fingers brushed his cheek, pushing a stray lock of hair away from his brow. "Rest," she whispered softly. "The world is safe for tonight." Zeus reached up, covering her hand with his. The faint spark of lightning crackled where their skin met, but she didn't flinch. She never flinched. Métis felt Zeus's hand tighten gently around hers. His eyes softened, the stormlight in them dimming under her calm gaze. For a fleeting moment, there was peace in that chamber. No thrones. No prophecies. Just a man and the woman who steadied him. Then, the chamber door swung open without warning, the polished bronze slamming back against marble walls with a metallic thud. The sudden burst of wind extinguished half the braziers along the hall. Shadows danced wildly across the floor as Hera stepped in. Her robes rippled behind her like dark waves. Her hair, still pinned high in its intricate coils, glowed gold under the flickering torchlight. But her eyes were cold and sharp as obsidian, fixed on Zeus and Métis with unreadable darkness. Métis didn't move her hand from Zeus's cheek. She simply turned her gaze calmly to Hera. Zeus's grip tightened slightly, but his face remained composed, if slightly tired. "Hera," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the same authority as a thunderclap. "It's late." Hera's lips curled in the smallest ghost of a smile, but there was no warmth in it. She stepped forward, each sandal strike echoing against the silent chamber floor. "I apologize for the intrusion," she said smoothly, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous all at once. "But I come bearing news you both should hear." Métis stayed silent. Her eyes watched Hera closely, patient and still as deep water. Zeus only sighed softly, letting his hand fall back to the blankets. "Speak, Hera," he said. She tilted her head slightly, eyes flicking to Métis before settling back on Zeus. "I spoke with the Moirai today. The Sisters of Fate." Her smile grew faintly, like frost spreading across glass. "They shared with me an interesting prophecy." Métis felt Zeus's fingers shift against her knee under the blanket, a subtle acknowledgement to stay calm. "She did." "What prophecy?" he asked, voice quiet. Hera's eyes gleamed. "They said, the son born of Métis will overthrow his father." She paused, letting the words hang heavy between them. "He will not only take your throne, Zeus. He will kill you." Silence. Outside, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across Olympus's peaks, echoing into the night. Métis sat perfectly still, but her fingers curled slightly around the edge of the blanket. Her gaze remained calm, but in her chest, a quiet sadness pulsed. Not fear. Not worry for herself. But for him. For the man who bore the weight of so many burdens alone. Zeus didn't flinch. His golden eyes didn't even flicker. He stared at Hera, then exhaled softly, almost like a tired laugh under his breath. "Is that all?" he asked, his voice low, almost amused. Hera's expression tightened just a fraction, her brow twitching before smoothing again. "You think it meaningless to hear that your own son will destroy you?" Zeus leaned back against the pillows, shifting his gaze away from her to the flickering shadows on the ceiling. I think, he said quietly, that if fate wants me dead, it will try, prophecy or not. And if my son is strong enough to defeat me. He paused, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Then perhaps he deserves Olympus more than I do. Hera stared at him, her eyes narrowed in cold disbelief. Métis felt a slow warmth bloom in her chest at his words. Not because of arrogance or defiance, but because of the simple truth within them. He was Zeus, Sky Father, God King. He didn't fear storms. He was the storm. Hera's jaw clenched. She turned her gaze sharply to Métis, her voice slicing the air like cold iron. And you, what do you say to this, wisdom goddess? Will you bear a child knowing he will bring ruin upon his father? Métis's eyes softened as she looked at Hera, unblinking, unafraid. If it is fate, then it is fate, she said quietly. But I will raise him to honor his father, not destroy him. For a moment, Hera faltered. Just a flicker of uncertainty. Then her lips pressed into a thin line. Foolish, she spat softly, almost to herself. She turned away sharply, her robe sweeping like thunderclouds around her ankles. Without another word, she left the chamber. The doors closed behind her with a deep, echoing boom that shook the braziers against the walls. Silence fell again. Métis reached out and gently brushed a curl of hair away from Zeus's brow. His eyes remained on the ceiling, golden and unreadable. Does it worry you? She asked softly. Zeus closed his eyes, breathing out slowly. No, he whispered. Because I've already lived long enough to know one truth. What truth? He turned his head slightly, looking at her with tired, gentle eyes. That everything ends eventually. Even gods. And if my end comes by my own son's hand, then at least I will know my line was strong enough to surpass me. Métis smiled faintly, her fingers trailing down to rest on his chest where his heart thundered quietly under her touch. You're still a fool, she whispered, her voice full of warmth. Perhaps, he murmured back, closing his eyes. But I am Zeus. And that is enough. Outside, lightning forked across the night sky in silent silver branches, illuminating Olympus's towers under the calm watch of its king and the quiet wisdom of his chosen queen. Olympus, midnight courtyards. Hera stormed down the marble steps of Zeus's chambers, her sandals striking the floor so hard that small sparks of divine light flared under her heels. The torch flames along the corridor flickered and bent away from her as she passed, their golden glow revealing the hard, frozen lines of her face. She stepped out into the wide courtyard. The air was cold here, high above the mortal world. Olive trees rustled softly in the night wind, silver leaves trembling under the quiet moon. But Hera felt none of its peace. Her chest heaved with quiet, burning rage. How dare he? She clenched her fists so tight her nails bit into her palms. The sting of pain grounded her fury, but only barely. Her jaw ached from how hard she was clenching her teeth. She could still see Zeus's calm, tired smile in her mind. Still hear his soft, amused voice. If my son is strong enough to defeat me, then perhaps he deserves Olympus more than I do. That arrogance. That blind, foolish confidence. Even after she twisted the words of the Morai into a dagger and plunged it into his heart, he didn't even bleed. She turned and slammed her palm against a marble column, cracking its edge with the force. The sound echoed across the silent courtyard, startling a flock of white doves that had roosted in the temple eaves. They burst into the sky in a flurry of wings, their shadows flickering over Hera's pale, furious face. Stupid Mun, she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. Stupid, stormborn, arrogant. Well, this is new. The deep voice rolled across the courtyard like a quiet tide. Hera froze, her shoulders stiffening, before she slowly turned. Poseidon stood under the archway that led in from the southern halls. His sea-green hair was loose tonight, falling past his shoulders in curling waves that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. He wore only a deep blue robe tied to the waist, his trident resting casually against his shoulder. His dark eyes studied her with faint amusement. Hera, sister, he said, tilting his head. What has you cracking columns before dawn? Hera glared at him, breathing hard. Leave me be, Poseidon. But he didn't move. He walked forward slowly, sandals silent against the marble, until he stood a few feet away. The scent of salt and deep ocean breeze curled off him, mixing with the cold mountain air. His gaze was calm, but there was a flicker of curiosity in it. "Tell me," he said softly, "what did our dear brother do this time?" Hera looked away, staring out at the endless night sky. The stars burned cold and silent above them. She swallowed, her throat tight with rage and bitter helplessness. She began, but her voice shook. She closed her eyes, gathering herself before trying again. "He refuses to see sense. Refuses to see me." Poseidon frowned slightly. "What sense is this?" Hera turned on him, her eyes burning gold in the torchlight. "He chooses Métis," she spat, the words dripping with hatred. "That Titan-born witch. He would make her queen of Olympus. He would let her children inherit his throne." Poseidon's face darkened. The quiet amusement vanished like a tide pulled back from jagged rocks. He stood very still for a long moment, studying his sister's trembling frame, before he spoke. "Métis," he said softly, almost to himself. "I see." Hera laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed harshly against the columns. "Do you see, brother? Do you see how foolish he is? To let a Titan rule beside him, when we only just tore their kind from power. It's an insult. To us. To you. To me." Poseidon was silent. The wind caught his hair, lifting it around his face like sea foam. In his eyes, shadows moved, old memories of battles against Kronos, of bleeding gods and screaming titans buried under oceans. Finally, he spoke. "You're right," he said quietly. "No Titan should ever sit on the throne of Olympus. Not as king. Not as queen." Hera looked up sharply. His eyes met hers, calm and dark and steady as the ocean depths. "I will help you," Poseidon continued. "If Métis becomes queen, then her children will be heirs. They will carry Titan blood into Olympus's throne forever. That I cannot allow." Hera's shoulders loosened, just slightly. For the first time that night, a flicker of relief moved across her face. She stepped closer to him, her voice low. "Will you stand with me then, brother?" she whispered. "Will you stand with me, against her?" Poseidon looked out at the night sky, where distant lightning flickered silently across the horizon. His grip tightened around his trident. The wind lifted his robes, revealing the carved muscles of his chest, the deep blue tattoos coiling across his collarbone like ocean currents. "I will stand with Olympus," he said finally. "And Olympus does not need a Titan queen." Hera's lips curved into a faint, cold smile. She reached out and placed her hand against his chest, feeling the slow, tidal power that pulsed beneath his skin. "Thank you," she whispered. "Together, we will keep our world as it should be." Poseidon didn't smile. He just looked down at her, his eyes dark as the deep sea, unreadable. "Be careful, Hera," he said softly. "The sea may be deep, but the storm is endless." Hera pulled her hand away, her smile growing sharper. "Then we will drown the storm," she said quietly. She turned and walked away into the shadows of the temple columns, her robes whispering softly across the marble. Poseidon watched her go, his gaze distant and cold. Thunder rumbled across the night sky once more, echoing down through Olympus's towers like the quiet warning of an unseen god. Gaia's cavern, the roots of the world. Zeus moved quietly through the vast, dim cavern. The roots of the earth curled down from the ceiling like ancient pillars, glowing faintly with tired green light. Pools of silver water lay still among moss and cracked stone. The air was warm here, heavy with the scent of soil and old life. At the center of it all, Gaia lay against a sloped mound of earth. Her skin was gray and cracked like ancient bark. Fine green veins of light pulsed faintly beneath her surface, but her breath came slow, deep, and labored. Her eyes were half closed, lost in dreams older than time. Zeus approached softly, his sandals crunching against fallen bits of stone. He lowered himself to sit beside her, folding his long legs with quiet grace. For a moment, he just watched her, his golden eyes reflecting the dim glow of the roots. Finally, he spoke, his voice gentle and rough at the same time, like distant thunder softened by clouds. "Granny," he murmured, a faint smile touching his lips. "How are you holding up?" Her eyelids fluttered, heavy and slow, before opening enough to look at him. Those eyes, pale green and deep as the world itself, focused on his face. She said nothing, but her lips twitched, almost into a smile. Zeus sighed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. I'm sorry it's been days since I came down here. He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. But Typhon managed to send him crawling back to Tartarus, where he belongs. But he left me a bit broken for a while. He gestured vaguely at his chest, still faintly bandaged beneath his robes. I've been bedridden for days, he said, his tone light but his eyes darkening with quiet guilt. Didn't even have the strength to come pay you a visit. Gaia's chest rose and fell in a deep, rumbling breath that vibrated the stones around them. Her eyes softened as she studied his face, the lines of exhaustion there, the shadows beneath his eyes, the quiet storm always flickering behind his gaze. Storm child. She rasped, her voice rough like shifting earth but warm. Always fighting. Even when you sit still. Zeus smiled faintly at that. He reached out, gently laying his hand over hers. Her skin felt cold and cracked but strong beneath the frailty. Yeah, he said softly. That's me. He fell silent, just sitting there with her, listening to the deep pulsing of the roots above them, the quiet hum of the earth's heart. The storm inside him calmed, if only for a moment, as he sat beside the mother of the world, feeling her slow, ancient warmth seep through his fingers. He closed his eyes, leaning back against the stone beside her, letting the quiet fill him. Rest, Granny, he murmured, his voice almost a whisper. I'll keep fighting for a little while longer, so you don't have to. Gaia's cavern, the roots of the world. The quiet stretched between them, broken only by the distant drip of water from the roots above. Gaia's breathing was slow and deep, like the pulse of the world itself. Her eyes drifted closed for a time before flickering open again, pale green and clouded with age, but still seeing everything. Tell me, she rasped softly, her voice dry like old earth shifting under deep roots. What has been happening up there? Zeus exhaled, rubbing his jaw as he looked at her. His thumb traced circles over the back of her hand, feeling the faint warmth beneath her cracked skin. Where do I even begin? He murmured, his voice low. He paused, listening to the cavern breathe around him before speaking again. Typhon is gone, he said quietly. Sent him back to Tartarus. Nearly tore me apart, but Olympus still stands. Gaia's lips twitched faintly, her eyelids fluttering as if in relief, though her breathing remained slow and labored. Zeus's gaze dropped to her chest, watching the faint glow of her veins flicker like dying starlight beneath stone. His throat tightened slightly. And now? He continued, voice trailing before he gathered himself. Now I'm dealing with something worse than monsters. Her eyes opened fully then, fixing on him with that deep, ancient focus that always made him feel like a child again. She waited silently, patient as the earth itself. Zeus shifted, leaning forward so his elbows rested on his knees. His golden hair fell forward around his face, hiding his tired eyes from the glowing roots above. I'm about to announce Métis as the Queen of Olympus, he said softly. For a moment, Gaia said nothing. But the roots above seemed to shift, their green light pulsing faintly with quiet knowing. Zeus let out a humorless chuckle, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Hera, she's furious, he said. You should have seen her face. The way she looks at Métis now, like she's already planning 100 ways to bury her. He paused, his fingers curling into his palms. And knowing Hera. He continued, his voice lower, almost resigned, she probably has. She's not the type to sit quietly while someone else sits where she believes she belongs. Gaia's breathing rasped quietly, filling the cavern with a sound like shifting gravel. Her cracked lips parted, her voice quiet but steady. And you, storm child, what do you want? Zeus closed his eyes, feeling her question settle deep in his chest. He let the silence stretch before answering, his voice softer than thunder had ever been. I don't know, he said honestly. I want peace. I want Métis. I want Hera to accept it, to accept her place beside me without needing to be everything. He looked up at Gaia, his golden eyes flickering in the dim glow of the cavern. But I know Hera, he said, his voice heavy with tired certainty. She won't. She'll keep fighting. Keep plotting. And Métis, she'll never fight back. She'll just let Hera do what she does and stay silent. He rubbed his forehead, feeling the ache behind his eyes. I don't know what to do, he admitted quietly. That's one of the reasons I came here. You've always seen things clearer than I can. Even now. Gaia's eyes remained on him, unblinking, deep and ancient. For a long moment, there was only the sound of her slow, labored breathing and the quiet drip of water from the glowing roots above. Finally, she spoke, her voice rough and quiet but carrying that unbreakable certainty of stone and soil. Storms cannot force the earth to move, she whispered. But they can shape it. Slowly. Zeus listened, his eyes never leaving hers. Métis is wisdom, but wisdom needs patience, Gaia continued, each word pulled from deep within her. Hera is pride, pride needs boundaries. She paused, her eyelids drooping with exhaustion. You, storm child, must be both. Zeus swallowed, feeling her words settle into him like heavy rain sinking into dry ground. He nodded once, slowly, squeezing her hand gently. Thank you, Granny, he whispered. Gaia's lips twitched faintly into the ghost of a smile. Remember, storms bring life, but also ruin. Choose which you wish to be. Her eyes closed then, her breathing slow and deep again, returning to that ancient sleep beneath the world. Zeus watched her for a long moment, the flickering green light of the roots casting shifting shadows across his face. He stood slowly, his limbs heavy but his heart steadier. As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back at her once more, his golden eyes quiet and thoughtful. I'll come back soon, he murmured. Rest well, old mother. Then he turned and walked out of the cavern, his sandals crunching softly against the stone as the quiet hum of the earth faded behind him. Olympus, the dawn sky over Olympus was pale and quiet, brushed with thin streaks of cloud that drifted like ghost veils across the rising sun. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint scent of olive trees and mountain stone. Zeus walked slowly through the long colonnade leading to the council courtyard. His robes of deep blue and white moved softly around his ankles, the golden clasps at his shoulders catching the new light. His sandals whispered across the marble, leaving faint sparks where the storm within him brushed the world. Gods and minor attendants watched him as he passed. Some bowed deeply, some fell to their knees. But none spoke. His presence today was heavy, not with anger, but with a silent certainty that pressed on every chest it passed. When he reached the high steps overlooking the main courtyard, he paused. The courtyard stretched wide and open before him, ringed with pale marble columns. Bronze braziers burned low around the edges, their smoke curling into the quiet air. Gathered below were the gods of Olympus, Poseidon, tall and silent, trident in hand, Hades, dark-robed and watchful, Demeter, radiant in green and gold, Hestia, standing calmly with her hands folded before her, and many other lesser gods, river spirits, and wind nymphs, all called to hear the words of their king. Zeus let the silence settle before he spoke, his voice quiet but carrying across every stone, every heart. Olympus, he began, his golden eyes scanning the gathered gods, has stood through darkness and storm, through the Titan wars, through the rise and fall of old powers. It stands now, and it will stand tomorrow. He paused, feeling the faint stirring of wind around his ankles, the morning breeze rising with his words. But a kingdom is not its halls or its thrones. It is its rulers, its guides, its voice. His gaze turned to Métis, standing slightly apart from the others. She wore a robe of pale lavender, simple and unadorned, her dark hair falling loose down her back. Her eyes were calm and steady as they met his. I have ruled alone, Zeus continued, his voice deepening with quiet resonance. But Olympus does not need a king alone. It needs wisdom beside thunder, thought beside storm. A faint murmur rippled through the assembly, some nodding, some glancing at Hera, who stood further back in a robe of deep crimson. Her face was blank, carved from marble, but her fingers twitched slightly where they clutched her golden sash. Zeus raised his hand, the sparks crackling faintly along his knuckles. In 3 days, he said, his voice like rolling thunder now, low and unbreakable, Olympus will gather again. And on that day, I will place the crown of queen upon the one whose wisdom has guided us from shadows, whose voice has steadied me, and whose mind sees beyond storms. He paused, turning his gaze fully to Métis. For a moment, the courtyard was silent except for the distant cry of an eagle circling above. Métis, he said softly, but the quiet carried more power than any roar. 3 days from now, Olympus will know you as its queen. Métis bowed her head, her expression unchanging, but her eyes shone faintly with a warmth that reached only him. Zeus looked back to the assembly, his gaze sweeping across gods and spirits alike. "Prepare the halls," he said. "Prepare the songs, the offerings, and the rites. Olympus will crown its queen under the eyes of dawn and dusk alike." No one spoke. They simply bowed as one, a silent wave of reverence that rippled through the courtyard. Even Poseidon inclined his head, though his eyes flickered once towards Hera. Zeus turned and descended the steps, walking towards Métis. As he reached her, she lifted her eyes to his. Neither spoke, but their silence was deep with unspoken words. Behind them, Hera's gaze burned like cold iron. Her nails bit into her palms until they almost drew blood. But she said nothing. She simply turned and walked away into the shadows of the inner halls, her robe trailing behind her like a dark river. Above Olympus, the sun rose fully, washing the marble towers in pale gold. The wind carried faint scents of cedar and olive blossom across the quiet courtyards as the gods dispersed, their hearts trembling with the echo of thunder and the whisper of coming storms. Olympus, the empty courtyard. The gods were already dispersing back to their halls, their sandals whispering across marble as their voices rose in quiet speculation. Only the morning wind remained, drifting between the tall columns and carrying the faint smell of olive leaves and burning incense. Zeus stood with Métis at his side, his hand brushing hers once before dropping back to his side. His golden eyes followed Hera's fading silhouette as she vanished beyond the eastern archways, her crimson robe trailing behind her like spilled wine. "Zeus." The voice came low and calm, but with a heaviness like deep currents pulling under the ocean surface. Zeus turned his head slightly, watching Poseidon approach from where he had remained standing after the announcement. His brother moved with the silent grace of tides, his long sea-green hair falling loosely around his shoulders, damp with salt mist that seemed to cling to his skin wherever he walked. Métis bowed her head slightly to Poseidon before stepping away, her lavender robes brushing softly against the marble as she left them alone. Zeus watched her go for a moment, the faint flicker of sadness crossing his face, before turning fully to Poseidon. "What is it, brother?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying only for them, lost beneath the echoing halls of Olympus. Poseidon didn't answer immediately. He simply stood there, staring past Zeus at the archway Métis had just walked through. His trident glinted faintly in the new sun, the three prongs humming softly with quiet, unspent power. Finally, he spoke, his words careful and low. "You know how I feel about Titans." Zeus raised an eyebrow slightly, his golden hair catching the breeze that drifted between them. "Métis is not Cronus," he said softly. Poseidon's gaze flicked to his brother, sea-green eyes dark and still. "No," he agreed. "She isn't. But her blood is theirs. And her mind is like the deep sea. Calm on the surface. But no one sees the trenches below." Zeus chuckled faintly, shaking his head. "That's why she is fit to rule beside me. She sees beyond what I can." Poseidon's jaw tightened slightly, his grip shifting on his trident shaft. "And Hera? Will you cast her aside like driftwood? She is storm and pride, but she is also Olympus, born of its first gods." Zeus's smile faded, his expression growing tired. He ran a hand through his hair, letting the strands fall back against his neck. "I am not casting her aside. She casts herself aside when she refuses to see beyond herself." Poseidon stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was little more than a rolling tide against stone. "You are making an enemy of her," he said. "And if Hera becomes your enemy, Olympus will bleed." For a moment, Zeus didn't speak. The wind moved between them, ruffling their robes and sending the scent of cedar smoke curling around their ankles. Then he looked up, his golden eyes meeting Poseidon's dark, endless gaze with a quiet certainty. "I know," he said simply. Poseidon studied him for a long time, the lines of his face unmoving. The courtyard felt colder suddenly, as if a tide had pulled away from the shore, leaving only silence in its wake. Finally, Poseidon sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to vibrate up from his chest. "You've always been stubborn," he murmured. "But remember, the sea is patient. The sea waits. And when storms pass, it reclaims what was lost." Zeus smiled faintly, a tired, knowing smile. "And you, brother, will you wait quietly for what you believe is yours?" Poseidon's lips curved into a humorless smirk. I will wait. But I will not bow. Zeus nodded once, accepting that truth between them. Then he stepped forward, clasping Poseidon's shoulder in a firm grip. Lightning flickered faintly across his fingers, crackling against the sea god's damp skin. But Poseidon didn't flinch. He never did. Keep Olympus steady, Zeus said softly, while I prepare for the coronation. Poseidon didn't answer. He simply turned away, his trident striking the marble floor with a dull chime as he walked back towards the sea-facing halls, the scent of salt trailing in his wake. Zeus watched him go, the morning sun rising higher above Olympus, washing the marble towers in pale gold. His gaze turned to the horizon where the sky met the endless world below, and for a moment, his eyes darkened with quiet storms that no one could hear. Then he turned and walked back into the halls of Olympus, the whispers of gods echoing behind him like distant thunder. Poseidon's footsteps faded into silence, leaving the colonnade empty but for the drifting scent of salt and cedar smoke. The pale morning light filtered through the marble arches, casting long shadows across the smooth floors. For a brief moment, Olympus felt still, caught between the ending night and the awakening day. Then Hera appeared at the far end of the hall. She moved like a shadow-given form, her crimson robes whispering against the stone as she approached. Her hair was pinned high, a few dark strands loose around her temples, framing her sharp eyes. There was no softness in her gaze today, only the cold gleam of calculation and restless fury. She stopped a few paces away from Poseidon, tilting her chin up slightly to meet his eyes. "What did he say?" she asked, her voice quiet, each word edged with restrained anger. It wasn't a question born of curiosity. It was born of strategy. Poseidon looked down at her, his expression calm and unreadable. The faint mist clinging to his shoulders curled in the thin morning breeze. He said. He began softly, his voice rolling low like a distant wave, "To do whatever you have in mind." Hera blinked once, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before her lips pressed into a thin, cold line. "Whatever I have in mind," she echoed, her voice bitter. She looked away, staring out through the open archway at the pale gold sky beyond. Her fingers twisted slightly in the folds of her robe, tightening until the fabric creased under her grip. Poseidon shifted his trident against the marble floor, watching her with that same silent stillness that made him both comforting and unnerving. "He's not ready to listen to you," he said quietly. "Or to me." Hera let out a small, humorless laugh, though no mirth reached her eyes. "He never listens. He only commands." Poseidon tilted his head slightly, sea-green hair falling over his shoulder. "And what will you do, sister?" She turned back to him slowly, her gaze sharp and dark, glowing faintly under the flickering torchlight. "What I've always done," she said softly, her voice low and heavy with quiet certainty. "What must be done?" Poseidon studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes calm, unreadable. Then he nodded once, his grip tightening around his trident. "Then do it," he said simply. Hera's lips curved faintly, the ghost of a smile that held no warmth. "I will." Without another word, she turned and walked away down the silent hall, her crimson robe trailing behind her like a dying flame. The echoes of her footsteps faded into the quiet, leaving Poseidon alone among the tall columns and drifting incense. He watched her go, his gaze thoughtful and heavy. Outside, the morning winds rose, stirring the olive trees along the temple paths. Their silver-green leaves whispered under the dawn, carrying secrets between gods that no mortal would ever hear. Poseidon sighed, a deep, quiet sound, and turned back towards the sea-facing halls, his mind already drifting to tides and battles yet unseen. The sun had barely climbed halfway through the sky before Hera moved. Her sandals struck marble with sharp, measured precision as she walked through the high halls of Olympus, her crimson robes flowing behind her like silent fire. Her eyes were cold, her mind clearer than it had been in years. She entered her private hall, flanked by tall silver columns wrapped in blooming ivy. The room was quiet, lit only by the filtered glow of sunlight through polished bronze latticework. A few handmaidens bowed low as she passed. She ignored them, her gaze fixed ahead. At the far end of the hall, several gods stood waiting. They turned as she approached, gods of lesser domains, gods whose loyalties shifted like reeds in the wind. There was Kratos, tall and broad-shouldered with eyes like dark iron. Bia, his sister, silent and sharp-eyed. There was Icelus, the Dreambringer, his pale robe drifting around him like mist. Beside him stood Phobos, god of fear, his young face handsome and cold. Hera stopped before them, folding her hands before her waist. Her gaze moved slowly across their faces, reading each flicker of greed, curiosity, or hidden loyalty. "Olympus stands at the edge of change," she said softly. Her voice carried through the quiet hall, as calm as a mother's lullaby, but her eyes burned with cold fury. Zeus would crown a Titan-born queen. He would let the blood of those who once enslaved us rule Olympus again. Kratos shifted, his jaw tightening. Bia said nothing, but her fingers curled slightly at her side. Phobos only smiled faintly, his dark eyes gleaming with silent amusement. Aeschylus blinked slowly, dream-heavy and unfocused. "And you," Hera continued, tilting her chin slightly, "are loyal to Olympus. Loyal to the gods. Loyal to me." No one spoke. The silence itself felt like an oath. She let it stretch before she spoke again, her voice dropping lower, edged with quiet steel. "Métis cannot be allowed to live. If she is crowned, the throne will never be ours again. Her wisdom will coil around Zeus's mind until he sees nothing else." Kratos inclined his head slightly, his iron-dark eyes unblinking. "What would you have us do, Lady Hera?" She looked at him, her gaze cold and unflinching. "Prepare your strength," she said. "When the day of coronation comes, we strike." A faint ripple of tension passed through them. Even Aeschylus seemed to wake slightly, his dream haze thinning as he watched her. Bia nodded once, silent approval. Phobos's faint smile widened. "The others?" Kratos asked quietly. "Demeter. Hestia. Will they stand with us?" Hera's eyes narrowed faintly. "Call them." Kratos bowed low, his massive frame bending with surprising grace. He turned and left, his footsteps heavy against the marble. The others followed, silent shadows slipping away through the wide halls of Olympus, leaving Hera alone in the quiet room. She stood there for a long moment, her fingers twisting together in front of her. The sunlight fell across her face, gilding her high cheekbones and shadowed eyes in cold gold. Outside, she could hear the faint song of temple doves, their calls gentle and mournful. A few hours later, Demeter and Hestia entered the chamber. Demeter's robes were bright green and gold, her long braids draped with olive leaves. Hestia wore pale cream, simple and unadorned, her hair tied back with a thin bronze cord. They bowed before Hera, though Demeter's bow was shallow, her green eyes wary. "Hera," Demeter said quietly. "You called us." Hera studied them, her gaze unreadable. "Olympus is at risk," she said calmly. "Zeus's choice threatens us all. Métis cannot be queen." Demeter frowned, folding her arms over her chest. "Métis is wise. She has guided Olympus with patience and clarity since the Titanomachy. Her reign will bring stability." Hera's lips tightened. "Her reign will end any chance of ours." Hestia stepped forward slightly, her calm brown eyes meeting Hera's without fear. "And what would you do, sister?" she asked softly. "Kill her? Spill divine blood in the halls of Olympus?" Hera said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. Demeter shook her head, her braids swaying softly over her shoulders. "I will not side with you in this," she said. "I have seen enough blood spilled in these halls." Hestia nodded in quiet agreement. "Nor will I," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I will keep Olympus's hearth burning. That is my duty. Not murder." Hera's gaze darkened, though her expression remained as still as carved marble. "You would both let our throne slip from us forever?" she asked, her voice low. Demeter's green eyes sharpened. "Better that than tear Olympus apart with your pride." Hestia reached out, touching Demeter's wrist lightly before looking back at Hera. "We love you," she said softly, "but we will not follow you down this path." They bowed once more before turning and leaving the hall, their robes whispering softly across the stone. Hera watched them go, her eyes hard, her jaw tight. When the door closed behind them, the quiet room felt colder. The sunlight had shifted, leaving her in pale shadow. She stood there alone, the silence pressing down on her shoulders like heavy iron. Finally, she turned and walked back to her private chambers, her footsteps silent and smooth against the marble floors. She entered her dim antechamber and closed the doors behind her, leaning against them for a brief moment. The cool bronze pressed against her back, grounding her trembling rage. She moved to the wide window overlooking Olympus's sprawling courtyards below. The gods moved like drifting lights beneath her, each carrying out their duties under the bright afternoon sky. She watched them for a long time, her fingers tightening against the window's stone ledge until her knuckles turned white. "No one will stand in my way," she whispered to the empty room. "Not Demeter. Not Hestia. Not even Zeus." She turned away from the window, her crimson robe sweeping around her ankles like blood spilled across marble. The air hummed faintly around her, a soft resonance of power stirring within her chest. She walked to her private shrine, kneeling before the small brazier burning with faint blue flames. Her fingers moved quickly, scattering small handfuls of herbs and powdered bone into the fire. The flames shifted, darkening to a deep violet as thin coils of smoke rose into the dim air. "Fates," she whispered, her voice low and shaking with quiet rage. "Show me the path to victory." The flames flickered and bent, shadows twisting across her pale face. For a brief moment, Hera's eyes glowed faintly with that same violet hue. Then the vision settled in her mind, dark and heavy and final. She bowed her head, letting her hair fall forward like a dark curtain, hiding the cold, thin smile that curled across her lips. "Soon," she murmured. "Very soon." Outside, the winds of Olympus picked up, rustling the olive trees and rippling the gold banners that hung from its high towers. The gods felt it without knowing why, a quiet, tightening storm gathering beneath their feet. And far above them, in the halls of Olympus, Hera rose to her feet, her robe trailing behind her like a silent river of blood and shadows. Olympus, the day of coronation. The sky over Olympus burned gold and white as the sun rose to its peak. Trumpets of bronze sounded from every tower, their calls echoing across the mountain, carried down into the mortal world like divine thunder. Marble courtyards overflowed with gods and spirits, all gathered to witness the crowning of their queen. Garlands of olive leaves and laurel hung from the colonnades. Perfumed smoke curled from 1,000 braziers, filling the air with the scent of cedar, sage, and crushed rose petals. Lesser gods moved through the gathered throng, scattering white and crimson blossoms across the marble floors until it looked as if Olympus itself bled beauty. Zeus stood on the highest dais at the center of the great courtyard. His robe was deep indigo trimmed with gold, pinned to the shoulder with a diamond lightning bolt. His hair fell in gleaming golden waves down his back, and his eyes burned with quiet stormlight. At his side stood Métis, her lavender robe simple but elegant, her dark hair pinned up with silver combs shaped like crescent moons. The gods watched in silent reverence. Poseidon stood near the front, trident in hand, his sea-green hair falling loose over his dark blue robe. Hades lingered in the shadows of a marble column, arms folded inside his obsidian cloak, his eyes hidden under his brow. Demeter and Hestia stood side by side, calm and solemn. Hera was there too, dressed in robes of blood-red silk embroidered with golden peacocks, her face a cold mask of regal beauty. Zeus lifted his hand. Thunder rumbled softly through the clouds above, a quiet command for silence. The courtyard fell still. "Gods of Olympus," he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard like rolling storm winds, "today we crown the queen of this realm. A queen of wisdom. A queen of patience. A queen who will guide Olympus beyond the reach of storms." His gaze turned to Métis, and for a moment, the storm in his eyes softened to gentle rain. "Métis," he said quietly, though every god heard him, "step forward." Métis moved with quiet grace to stand before him. She bowed her head, her hands folded before her, her eyes calm and unafraid. The gathered gods leaned forward slightly, the tension thick as unfallen thunder. Zeus raised the golden crown high. Crafted by Brontes himself, it glimmered with runes of law and wisdom, thin threads of silver and electrum twisting between polished opals that flickered with hidden light. He lowered it slowly towards Métis's brow, a sharp whistling split the air. Time slowed. Zeus's eyes snapped sideways, lightning flaring in his pupils. A spear, its shaft black as pitch and its blade gleaming with cruel iron light, cut through the air straight towards Métis's chest. In a blur, Zeus's hand shot out. Lightning crackled from his palm as he caught the spear mid-flight, its iron head inches from Métis's heart. The force of the catch sent cracked spiderwebbing through the marble floor at his feet. The courtyard erupted in chaos. Gods leapt back, weapons half-drawn, voices rising in confusion and fear. Zeus stood unmoving, his chest heaving as the spear trembled in his grip, smoke rising where his lightning scorched its dark wood. His eyes blazed with raw fury as he turned slowly, sweeping his gaze across the assembled gods. "Who did this?" he roared, his voice shaking the columns and rattling the bronze shields hanging along the high arches. Thunder split the sky above, jagged silver bolts forking down to strike the far peaks of Olympus, sending tremors through the sacred mountain. Silence fell. The gods stood frozen, eyes wide, robes trembling against their skin. Even Poseidon looked grim, his grip tightening on his trident. Hades narrowed his eyes, shadow flickering across his pale face. Demeter covered her mouth with her fingers. Hestia's eyes welled faintly with tears, though none fell. Métis stood very still beside Zeus, her eyes calm despite the spear's iron head being so close to her chest only moments before. She reached out and touched his forearm gently. "Zeus," she whispered, her voice low but steady, "let them speak." His chest heaved once, twice. Then he threw the spear down at his feet. It clattered across the marble, spinning before settling with its black shaft vibrating against the stone. "Step forward," he commanded, his voice deep with quiet threat. "Step forward and claim your deed, before I tear this mountain apart to find you." No one moved. The gods remained silent, fear rippling between them like a hidden tide. Hera watched with narrowed eyes, her lips pressed into a thin line. The faintest flicker of tension tightened her jaw, but her face remained smooth, carved in cold beauty. Kratos stepped forward, his heavy sandals cracking the marble beneath his feet. His iron-dark eyes met Zeus's without fear, but he shook his head slowly. "It was not I, Lord Zeus." Beside him, Bia remained silent, her gaze sharp and cold. Phobos only smiled faintly, though his fingers twitched at his sides, the faint scent of blood drifting around him like perfume. Icelus blinked slowly, dream mist coiling from his hair as he whispered, "Not I, not I." Zeus's gaze swept over them and then turned, his blue eyes burning into Hera's. For a long moment, the courtyard was silent but for the quiet hiss of breeze rustling the olive garlands overhead. Hera tilted her chin slightly, meeting his gaze with a calm, regal coldness. "You think I would act so openly?" she asked softly, her voice like frost across still water. Zeus's jaw tightened. Lightning flickered across his shoulders, his fingers curling into fists. "Do not test me today, Hera," he said, his voice low and shaking with the effort to remain calm. "Not today." Hera said nothing. She merely lowered her gaze slightly, the faintest curve of a smile touching the corner of her lips before vanishing as quickly as it came. Zeus looked away, his chest rising and falling with each slow breath as he turned back to Métis. The crown still lay in his free hand, untouched by the chaos. Carefully, he lifted it again, his fingers trembling faintly from rage. Métis raised her eyes to him, her gaze quiet and unafraid. "Continue," she whispered, her voice soft and calm. His throat tightened. Slowly, he placed the crown upon her brow. The moment it settled, the sky above split with silent lightning, thin silver forks branching across the heavens like tree roots in a black sea. A warm breeze washed through the courtyard, rippling the garlands and banners. The gods bowed low, their voices hushed in quiet reverence. "Hail Métis," Poseidon said quietly, his deep voice rolling through the courtyard like a tide against stone. "Queen of Olympus." "Hail Métis," the gods echoed softly, their voices trembling with the fading echoes of thunder. Zeus stepped back, his gaze sweeping across them all. The storm behind his eyes burned cold and silent, a promise of reckoning yet to come. Above them, the sun burned pale and distant in a sky crossed by silent silver scars, and Olympus held its breath, caught between dawn and ruin. Olympus, the coronation, ended under uneasy skies. The gods dispersed in silence, the soft brush of sandals on marble echoing like distant rain. Métis stood quietly beside Zeus, her new crown glinting with cold silver light as she accepted whispered congratulations and solemn bows. Hera watched from afar, her crimson robes motionless in the cooling breeze. When the crowds faded and Olympus returned to its restless quiet, Hera moved swiftly. She left the high halls through side corridors, robes whispering against polished stone as she passed columns carved with stories of old victories and older betrayals. Her sandals clicked with steady resolve as she descended into the deeper chambers of Olympus, where shadows pooled in cold corners and the air smelled of old incense and burnt offerings. She entered a long, narrow hall lit only by thin slits of daylight cutting down from high windows. At the far end stood a set of bronze doors carved with peacock feathers and olive branches. Two silent guards bowed deeply as she approached, pushing the doors open without a word. Inside, the chamber was dim. Tall oil lamps burned along the walls, their flames flickering with thin yellow light. The ceiling rose high above them, lost in darkness, and ivy crawled down along the marble pillars like silent green veins. Hera walked to the center of the room where Kratos, Bia, Phobos, and Aeschylus stood waiting. Poseidon was there too, leaning against a column with his trident resting across his shoulders. His sea-green hair fell loose around his dark blue robes, and his expression was unreadable. They fell silent as Hera entered. She stopped before them, folding her hands before her waist, her golden cuffs glinting in the lamplight. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hiss of burning oil and the restless breath of the hidden chamber. "That," Hera said finally, her voice low and sharp, "just shows us one thing." Kratos tilted his chin slightly, his heavy brow furrowing. "That Zeus is on high alert," he rumbled. Hera nodded once, her lips curling into a thin smile. "Yes. We cannot harm Métis so long as he is present. His vigilance, it is beyond even my expectations." Bia shifted, her dark eyes flicking to Poseidon before returning to Hera. "Then, what do we do?" Hera's smile widened faintly, though there was no warmth in it. "We wait," she said softly. "We wait for a moment when Zeus is not here, or better yet," she paused, her eyes glittering under the lamplight, "when he is not in our realm entirely." Poseidon lifted his gaze from where he watched the flickering flames, his dark eyes narrowing slightly. "And how, dear sister," he asked, his voice calm and deep as the ocean floor, "do you propose we achieve that?" Hera turned slowly to face him, her robe shifting around her ankles like liquid blood. For a moment, she said nothing, letting the tension coil tight around them all like a strangling vine. Then she spoke, her voice low and cold with quiet satisfaction. "Soon," she said, "Zeus will leave Olympus. He cannot remain chained to this mountain forever. The mortals are stirring again. Their kings are fighting in the east, their cities rebelling in the west. He will go to them, to remind them of his rule." Phobos tilted his head slightly, his young face gleaming with faint amusement. "And when he does?" Hera's smile grew sharper. "When he does, Métis will remain here. She is queen now. She will stay to rule in his stead, to show Olympus that his choice was wise. And in that time..." She paused, her gaze sweeping across each of them, reading their silent anticipation. "We strike." Kratos grunted softly, a sound of approval. Bia folded her arms over her chest, silent and still. Aeschylus blinked slowly, dream mist drifting around his hair as he murmured, "Dreams of falling, dreams of silent blood." Poseidon said nothing for a long moment. Then he pushed away from the column, his sandals brushing against ivy-strewn marble as he stepped forward, the heavy butt of his trident echoing against the floor. "And how will you do it?" he asked quietly. "Even if Zeus is gone. Métis is cunning. She will not step blindly into your traps." Hera turned to him fully, lifting her chin with regal poise. "That is why it will not be a trap," she said softly. "It will be a gift." Poseidon frowned faintly, watching her with unreadable dark eyes. "Explain." Hera stepped closer to him, her robes whispering across the marble. "We will use her own wisdom against her. We will create a crisis, a false threat to Olympus. One that only she, in her wisdom, would step forward to resolve. And in that moment of exposure, she lifted her hand, her fingers curling slowly into a fist. We end her." Phobos's smile widened faintly, dark excitement flickering across his handsome features. "And the gods?" he asked. "They will not question her death?" Hera's gaze flicked to him, sharp and cold. "They will mourn her. They will call it tragedy. A queen dying to protect Olympus from a hidden threat. But Zeus will return to find his throne empty, his queen slain, and his people already grieving." Aeschylus whispered faintly, dream mist curling around his fingers. "Dreams of tears, dreams of silent mourning." Bia nodded once, her dark eyes flickering with approval. Kratos grunted again, a deep, quiet sound of agreement. Poseidon remained silent, studying Hera for a long moment. Then he inclined his head slightly, though his face remained dark and unreadable. "And if Zeus learns the truth?" he asked softly. Hera smiled faintly, though her eyes burned with cold certainty. Then he will learn that Olympus belongs to its gods, not to a Titan queen. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The flickering flames cast shifting shadows across their faces, each god lost in their own thoughts, their own private hungers and fears. Outside, the winds of Olympus rose, rattling the bronze doors and rustling the ivy that curled around the high windows. Hera turned away from them, walking to the far end of the room where a small shrine to herself burned with thin blue flames. She knelt before it, her robes pooling around her like spilled blood, and pressed her fingers to the cold marble floor. "Soon," she whispered to the flames, her voice low and steady. "Soon she will fall." Behind her, the gods shifted. Phobos's quiet laughter rippled through the shadows like a snake moving through grass. Kratos and Bia stood silent and ready. Icelus drifted into dream haze once more, his eyes half-closed and glowing with pale mist. Poseidon turned away, resting his trident against his shoulder as he gazed into the darkness beyond the flickering lamps. The room felt colder suddenly, the shadows pressing closer around them all. Hera rose slowly, turning back to face her gathered allies, her crimson robes whispering softly across the marble. "Prepare yourselves," she said quietly. "Our time comes soon." And as they bowed their heads before her, the faint sounds of Olympus drifted down into the hidden chamber, the soft songs of temple doves, the whisper of olive branches in the breeze, and the distant echo of divine laughter carried on thin mountain winds. But beneath it all, silent and unseen, the quiet storm of betrayal gathered its strength, waiting for the day when Olympus would bleed. Zeus stood at the edge of the balcony, his white robes drifting in the sharp morning wind. Below him, Olympus spread out in silent splendor, marble halls shining in dawn light, temple braziers smoking with fresh offerings, and gardens of olive and laurel drifting with bees and small songbirds. But he saw none of it. His fists clenched at his sides, the crackle of faint static biting the air around him. Métis stood a few paces behind, her silver crown catching the rising sun in quiet brilliance. She watched him with calm eyes, though faint worry lined her brow. "Zeus," she said softly, her voice clear and unhurried, "you cannot let this eat at you." Hera will not admit it. She has no reason to. Zeus turned sharply, lightning flickering across his irises. His hair, loose this morning, whipped across his shoulders with the force of his aura. "She orchestrated this," he growled, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "The fake threats. The hidden danger to Olympus. She wanted you vulnerable, exposed to the council. She wanted you dead." Métis didn't flinch. She folded her hands before her waist, her blue robes whispering softly in the breeze that cut through the high balcony arches. "And yet," she said gently, "I am alive." Zeus exhaled sharply, turning away again. The wind stirred around him, ruffling his robes like restless wings. "She thinks I am blind to her schemes," he muttered, his teeth gritted. "But this," he paused, his hands trembling faintly before he forced them still. "This is not the first time she has moved against you," Métis finished for him, her voice soft and calm. "And it will not be the last." He didn't respond. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the keen whistling of mountain winds and the faint distant ringing of temple bells. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and tired. "She was not always like this." Métis' gaze softened. She stepped forward, placing a gentle hand against his broad back. "No one is born a schemer," she said. "Even gods." For a moment, he closed his eyes, feeling her warmth through the thin fabric of his robe. Her scent was cool and clear, like fresh river water over stone. "Come inside," she said quietly. "Eat. Rest. The world will still be here when you wake." He didn't move. Didn't turn. His eyes remained locked on the glowing horizon beyond Olympus' golden spires. "In a moment," he said softly. She studied him for a breath longer, then nodded once, silent and regal as she turned and left the balcony, her silver crown catching one last glint of dawn before she disappeared behind the tall carved doors. Zeus stood alone, his breathing deep and silent as the winds whipped around him. Then, a faint fluttering noise. He turned his head sharply. Perched on the window ledge just inside his chamber were two massive ravens. Their feathers shimmered with faint cosmic oil sheen, eyes like black glass marbles reflecting the shifting dawn. "Thought and memory," he rumbled softly. The ravens caught in unison, flaring their wings slightly. One of them, its beak faintly chipped from an old injury, leaned forward and gagged once, spitting out a small rolled scroll tied in dark leather cord. Zeus raised a brow, stepping forward to take it from where it clattered onto the stone window sill. He glanced at the raven, who simply cawed again, flicking its beady eyes impatiently. "You'd think," he muttered under his breath as he unrolled the scroll, "that Odin would find a better way to send messages. Perhaps one that does not involve bird vomit." The ravens flapped their wings irritably, clicking their beaks at him before launching themselves off the window ledge in unison. He watched them wheel away into the brightening sky, small black shapes against the deep gold and pink of dawn. He turned his eyes back to the scroll. The leather uncurled with a faint crackle of ancient runes, revealing Odin's precise, blade-sharp handwriting across thin white bark parchment. "Zeus, King of Olympus, you are invited to the naming ceremony of my son, Baldur, to be held at the golden halls of Gladsheim in 2 moons' time. There will be feasting, poetry, and combat exhibitions. Bring what honor you will. Woden Allfather." Zeus exhaled softly through his nose, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite the storm in his chest. "Baldur," he murmured. "So that's what you name him." He rolled the scroll back up and tucked it into his belt sash. The dawn breeze rustled his long hair across his shoulders again, the scent of cold olive groves drifting up from the mountain gardens below. His eyes flicked south, towards where Asgard lay hidden beyond the mortal realms, wrapped in runic veils and rainbow bridges. 2 moons' time. He frowned faintly, the smile fading as his thoughts drifted back to Hera. To Métis. To the endless tensions crawling beneath Olympus' golden floors. He felt the weight of his throne like a stone on his spine. The lives under his rule, divine and mortal alike. His mother's quiet prayers from the depths of Gaia's groves. His father's silent grave in Tartarus. His brothers and sisters' watching eyes. The storm inside him curled tighter, quiet lightning crackling across his skin before fading back into silence. He turned away from the balcony railing, robes drifting softly around his ankles. His sandals brushed against the marble floor with each heavy step as he walked back into his chambers, the carved golden doors closing silently behind him. In the faint dawn shadows, Métis sat by the low table, pouring steaming tea into thin bronze cups. She looked up at him as he entered, her eyes tired but calm, her silver crown set lightly against her dark hair. "Was it Odin?" she asked softly. Zeus grunted in confirmation, sinking down onto the floor cushions opposite her. She passed him a cup, the pale steam curling between them like a silent offering. "Baldur's naming ceremony," he said after a sip, the hot tea cutting through the chill in his bones. Métis smiled faintly. "Then you will go." He said nothing for a long moment. The tea's warmth seeped into his chest, softening the ache there. He watched her across the rim of the cup, her calm eyes, her quiet hands folding the tea cloth in neat, silent motions. Finally, he set the cup down. "Yes," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "I will go." Métis nodded once, her gaze lowering back to the tea she poured for herself. "Then I will remain," she said, her voice firm and serene. "Olympus must not be left without rule." Zeus closed his eyes briefly, a flicker of pain passing through his chest. He reached out across the low table, his hand covering hers, his thumb brushing lightly against her wrist. "Be careful," he whispered. She smiled faintly without lifting her gaze. "Always." And as the pale dawn light filtered through the high windows of Olympus, the two sat together in quiet silence, the smell of hot tea and distant olive groves curling around them like a fleeting, gentle peace. But in the quiet corners of Zeus' mind, lightning still whispered, carrying with it the distant echoes of war drums beating beyond the rainbow bridge and the colder, closer winds of betrayal waiting to break Olympus apart. The skies above Asgard were a pale blue dome streaked with thin clouds drifting like silk threads. The golden towers of Gladsheim rose high, their rune-carved walls gleaming under the mid-morning sun. Banners of deep red and black fluttered from their battlements, each one marked with Odin's triple-horn symbol in silver thread. The bridge of Bifrost shimmered faintly at the realm's edge, its fractured rainbow light curving down into distant mortal skies far below. Inside the courtyards, laughter echoed. "Thor, wait up!" Small sandals slapped against polished flagstones as a boy with wild dark hair raced after a taller child. Thor, sturdy and golden-haired, swung a short wooden hammer in wide arcs as he ran, his deep laughter booming through the gardens. "Too slow, Loki!" he shouted, spinning to face his friend with a grin, his young arms flexing with the easy strength he was born with. You can't catch me even if you tried all day. Loki skidded to a stop, his thin frame heaving with short breaths. His long black hair drifted in the breeze, framing sharp green eyes that glimmered with playful irritation. He wore dark green tunic robes tied with thin gold cord and a foxfur collar that shifted each time he moved. Don't be so sure, he panted, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. Speed beats strength, watch. He raised his hands, fingers weaving through a quick set of runic gestures he'd practiced in secret behind the apprentice halls. A thin flicker of green-gold mana pulsed through his veins, crackling lightly around his knuckles. Thor tilted his head, grin widening as he planted his small wooden hammer against the stone floor. Magic again, he said, his young voice deep despite his age. Don't tell father. He'll say you're cheating. Only if you tell him, Loki shot back, eyes flicking up sharply. Which you won't. He vanished in a flicker of green mist, reappearing behind Thor in a silent blink. Before Thor could turn, Loki jabbed his fingers into his friend's ribs, making the bigger boy jump with a loud yelp that rang through the marble gardens. Got you. Loki crowed, his grin stretching wide across his pale, sharp face. He flicked his long black hair over his shoulder with arrogant flair. Thor rubbed his ribs, scowling half-heartedly. That's not fair, Loki. You used your vanish again. And you use your fists for everything, Loki said, shrugging. We're both good at something. Thor grunted, his frown melting into another big grin as he hefted his wooden hammer over his shoulder. Still gonna beat you in the next spar. I'm counting on it, Loki replied smoothly, his green eyes glittering with cunning mirth. From the high balcony above the training courtyards, Frigg stood watching them. Her white gold hair fell in braided loops around her shoulders, and her robes of midnight blue silk drifted softly in the courtyard breezes. She rested her palms lightly against the stone balustrade, her gaze soft and watchful. Always playing tricks on Thor, she murmured under her breath, though a faint smile curved her lips. Beside her, a broad-shouldered figure stepped forward, clad in heavy rune-etched black steel. Odin's single eye gleamed under his low battle crown, the other was covered by a smooth iron patch carved with shifting protection runes. His beard, streaked with silver, stirred faintly in the breeze. He learns fast, Odin said quietly, his gravel-deep voice echoing across the balcony stone. Faster than Thor. Frigg glanced sideways at him, her pale blue eyes tired but warm. But Thor's heart is kinder, she said. Odin said nothing for a moment, simply watching his sons below. Thor had grabbed Loki around the neck in a playful headlock, grinding his knuckles into Loki's scalp as the smaller boy flailed and shouted curses in the ancient Vanir dialect that Frigg pretended not to understand. Kindness has its place, Odin said at last, folding his massive arms across his chest. But cunning wins wars. Frigg exhaled softly, though her eyes never left her sons. And who will win peace? Odin didn't reply. His gaze remained locked on the courtyard below, his single eye reflecting the shifting green-gold mist that flickered around Loki's fingers as he slipped from Thor's grip and vanished again, reappearing high atop a marble lion statue to stick out his tongue at his brother. Thor roared with playful rage, running forward to jump onto the statue's base, shaking it so violently that Loki lost his balance with a yelp, tumbling forward. Thor caught him easily, slinging him over his broad shoulder with a grin wide enough to split the sky. I win again. Thor shouted, spinning in place as Loki flailed in the air, his green robes twisting around his thin legs. Put me down, you oaf. Loki screamed, though his laughter rang clear beneath his curses. Frigg's smile widened faintly, her hands curling tighter around the stone railing. Let them be boys a little longer, she whispered, almost to herself. Odin's gaze flicked sideways, studying her for a moment before returning to his sons. They will be gods soon enough, he said. Below, Thor set Loki down roughly, making the smaller boy stumble forward. Loki immediately spun, his green eyes blazing with annoyed pride. I'll remember that, he hissed, brushing dirt off his knees. Good, Thor replied, still laughing. Then you won't do it again. Oh, I'll do it again, Loki said, grinning wickedly. But better. Thor just chuckled, ruffling Loki's black hair with one big hand before walking away, humming a crude tavern tune he'd learned from one of Odin's Einherjar guards. Loki watched him go, his grin fading into a thoughtful line. He reached up, fixing his disheveled hair before flicking his fingers lightly, summoning a small illusory serpent that curled around his wrist with faint hissing sounds. He watched it slither across his knuckles, his green eyes narrowing slightly. One day, he thought quietly. One day you'll see what else I can do. He closed his fist, making the illusion vanish into a ripple of green mist. High above them, the ravens Hugin and Munin wheeled across the Asgard sky, their cries ringing across the golden towers. Odin turned his gaze upward, watching them for a long silent moment before lowering his eyes back to his sons. Thor had sat down under a laurel tree, chewing on a thick piece of honeyed barley bread, while Loki perched beside him, muttering something under his breath as he flicked pebbles into the fountain with precise rune-enhanced flicks. Each pebble skipped 6, 7, 8 times before sinking under the silver surface. The quiet courtyard breeze carried faint echoes of their childish bickering and laughter up to the balcony where their parents stood, wrapped in the restless peace of a realm that stood always on the edge of storms. Odin exhaled softly, his massive frame unmoving as his voice rumbled low under his breath. Let the world sleep while it can. Frigg said nothing, only placed her hand over his, her fingers cold against his battle-worn knuckles. And far beyond Asgard's gleaming walls, the mortal realm stirred under waking dawns, unaware that 2 boys, one with thunder in his veins and one with serpents in his shadow, would shape their fate for centuries to come. Olympus, Hera's private chambers. The halls of Olympus glowed with pale afternoon light as Zeus walked through them, his robes brushing softly against polished marble. The golden clasps at his shoulders glinted with every step, catching the sunbeams that streamed through the high arched windows. Servants bowed as he passed, their eyes lowered, their breath held until he was gone. His sandals struck the floors with quiet certainty, each step echoing through the silent colonnades like distant thunder. He stopped before the tall bronze doors of Hera's private chambers. 2 handmaidens stood guard, each bowing low as he approached. Without a word, they pushed open the doors, letting him enter the cool dimness beyond. Hera's chambers were quiet. Thin veils of gauze drifted from the high ceiling, pale as moonlight, shifting softly in the breeze from the open balcony. The scent of sandalwood and crushed jasmine lingered in the air. Hera sat before a polished silver mirror, her long dark hair unbound, falling like a shadow down her back. She wore a robe of deep crimson silk embroidered with golden feathers, its sleeves pooling around her as she brushed her hair with slow, silent strokes. She saw him in the mirror before she turned, her eyes flicking up to meet his golden gaze. Zeus, she said quietly, her voice calm and low. To what do I owe this visit? Zeus watched her for a moment, saying nothing as he studied her reflection. The tired lines around her eyes. The cold stillness in her gaze. The quiet beauty that refused to fade despite the burden she carried. Slowly, he stepped forward until he stood behind her, his massive frame towering over her slender shoulders. He rested his hands lightly on the carved back of her silver chair. I am going to Asgard, he said, his deep voice rumbling softly through the quiet chamber. Odin has requested my presence for the naming ceremony of his son. Hera's fingers paused in their brushing. She set the silver comb down on her lap and turned slightly to look up at him, her dark brows arching faintly. And you want me to come with you? She asked. Her voice was calm, but there was a faint edge to it, hidden beneath her quiet poise. Zeus nodded once. Yes. I want you to stand beside me. Hera tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharp and unblinking. Why not take Métis? She asked softly, each word careful and cold. She is your queen now. It would be fitting for her to stand with you before Odin and Frigg. Zeus exhaled slowly, his golden eyes narrowing faintly as he studied her. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hiss of burning sandalwood in the small bronze brazier near the balcony doors. I want to spend time with you, he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. Métis is queen of Olympus. But you are still Hera. Her gaze flickered at that, though her face remained as still as carved marble. She turned back to the mirror, picking up her comb again, running it through her hair with silent, measured strokes. You say that as though it means something, she murmured. Zeus stepped closer, resting one massive hand lightly on her bare shoulder. The warmth of his skin seeped into hers, but she did not lean into it. Her eyes met his in the mirror, cold and unflinching. It does, he said quietly. Isn't it your dream to stand beside me? To be seen with me, not as a queen alone, but as my equal before other gods. Her fingers tightened around the comb. My dream, she echoed softly, her voice tinged with quiet bitterness. Dreams are for girls, Zeus. I am long past them. He leaned down slightly, his golden hair falling around his face like drifting sunlit threads. For a brief moment, his eyes softened, the stormlight behind them flickering into quiet sadness. "Then stand beside me not as a dream," he said softly, "but as yourself." Hera said nothing. She simply set the comb down once more and rose from her chair, her crimson robes falling around her like dark fire. She moved past him without looking at his face, walking to the wide balcony where the golden afternoon light spilled across the pale marble floor. She stood there for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon where the sky burned with thin streaks of orange and pale gold. Zeus watched her silently, his hands curling lightly at his sides. The breeze carried the faint scent of her jasmine oil back to him, warm and cold all at once. Finally, she turned, her eyes dark and calm. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow at dawn," he replied, his voice steady. She nodded once, her gaze flicking away from him to the quiet gardens far below her balcony. "Then I will be ready." Zeus stepped forward, placing his hand lightly on her back. She did not flinch, but she did not lean into his touch either. For a moment, he closed his eyes, feeling the quiet tension between them from like a silent cord pulled too tight. "I will see you at dawn," he murmured. Without another word, he turned and left her chambers, his footsteps echoing softly against the polished marble floors. Hera watched him go, her eyes dark and unreadable. When the bronze doors closed behind him, she let out a slow breath, her fingers curling around the stone balustrade of the balcony until her knuckles whitened. Outside, the winds of Olympus rose, carrying the thin scent of olive leaves and distant thunder. She stood there a long time, her crimson robes shifting around her ankles like dying embers as the sun sank low beyond the western peaks. And far above her, hidden beyond mortal skies, the ravens of Asgard wheeled in silent black arcs, their shadows flickering across the pale clouds as the world turned towards a dawn that promised nothing but storms. Hera stood on her balcony for a long time after Zeus left, watching the sky darken with the coming night. The fading gold bled into violet and deep blue, the first stars trembling faintly in the heavens above Olympus. A faint breeze rustled her hair against her cheeks, carrying the last warmth of the day away into the silent evening. Slowly, a smile curved across her lips. She turned from the balcony, her crimson robe swirling softly around her ankles as she stepped back into her dim chamber. The burning sandalwood embers pulsed softly in the brazier, casting thin shadows across the gauze curtains drifting from the ceiling. She clapped her hands once, sharply. A young servant girl appeared from behind a hanging veil, bowing so deeply her forehead almost touched the marble floor. "Bring Poseidon to me," Hera said, her voice calm, almost gentle, but edged with quiet command. "Tell him I wish to speak with him in private tonight." The girl bowed again, her voice trembling as she whispered, "At once, Lady Hera," before hurrying away, her soft sandals pattering against the polished floors as she vanished into the halls. Hera turned and walked to the long low table near her bed, her bare feet silent against the cold stone. She picked up a small silver bell and rang it lightly. The thin chime floated through the chamber like a shard of moonlight. Within moments, another servant appeared, this one older, with her graying hair tied back tightly and her robes plain white linen. "Summon my cohorts," Hera said quietly, not looking at the woman. Her dark eyes were fixed on the flickering brazier flames. "All of them. Tonight." "Yes, Lady Hera," the woman murmured before backing away into the shadows beyond the doorway. Hera stood there, feeling the silence settle around her again. The flames of the brazier shifted, burning deeper blue for a moment as a thin coil of jasmine-scented smoke curled towards the ceiling. She reached out and trailed her fingers through it, watching the smoke break and reform around her pale hand. Her mind was quiet, sharper than it had been in years. Thoughts flickered behind her eyes like quicksilver. Each idea, each memory of slight or betrayal, each moment Zeus had ignored her words from Aetisa's soft voice, built itself into her growing plan. "He wants to take me to Asgard," she thought, her lips curving faintly again. "He wants to parade me before Odin and Frigg. He wants me to stand beside him. So let him see me for what I truly am." The bronze doors opened silently behind her, the breeze of their movement stirring the gauze veils hanging across the room. Poseidon entered without bowing, his tall frame filling the doorway. His sea-green hair was tied back loosely, damp strands clinging to the heavy blue and gold robes that draped across his broad shoulders. "You sent for me, sister," he rumbled, his deep voice quiet but edged with curiosity. His trident was absent, left outside her private chambers as custom demanded. Hera turned to him, her smile calm and small, like the curve of a blade just before it cuts. "Yes, brother," she said softly, motioning him forward. "We have much to discuss." Poseidon stepped closer, his bare feet silent against the marble as he stopped before her. His dark eyes studied her face, reading the careful stillness there, the gleam hidden behind her lashes. "What is it now?" he asked. "The coronation has passed. Métis is queen. Zeus has made his choice." "He has," Hera said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But that does not mean she will keep her crown." Poseidon raised an eyebrow slightly, though his face remained otherwise calm. "And what do you plan, Hera?" She tilted her head, her dark hair falling like a curtain over one shoulder. "Zeus is taking me with him to Asgard tomorrow at dawn," she said. "He wishes me to stand beside him at the naming ceremony for Odin's son." Poseidon's brow furrowed faintly. "Leaving Métis alone in Olympus." Hera's smile widened, slow and sharp as moonlight on black water. "Exactly." Poseidon exhaled quietly, a faint glimmer of interest flickering in his gaze. "You intend to strike while he is away?" "I intend," Hera said softly, stepping closer to him, her voice dropping to a thin whisper, "to strike when he is not only away, but when he is in a realm that binds his powers in hospitality oaths. Asgard's rules are ancient and sacred. He will not be able to return swiftly without disrespecting Odin. And Zeus will never risk his pride for Métis." Poseidon studied her for a long, silent moment. Outside, the winds of Olympus sighed against the tall bronze windows, rustling the jasmine vines climbing the balcony railings. Finally, he nodded once. "What do you require of me?" he asked. "Strength," Hera said. "Authority. When I am gone with Zeus, you will remain here. You will stand as Olympus's second power. My cohorts will act on my orders, but your presence will ensure order does not collapse into chaos before the deed is done." Poseidon tilted his head slightly, dark sea-green hair slipping over his broad shoulder. "And what of the other gods? Hestia, Demeter, will they stand aside again?" "They will," Hera said calmly, her gaze unblinking. "They will weep and pray to Gaia's silent roots, but they will not move against us. Not if it is swift." Poseidon grunted softly, a low sound of approval. "Then plan it well, sister." "I already have," Hera whispered. The bronze doors opened again, and her cohorts entered silently, shadows drifting across the veiled chamber. Kratos, broad and iron-eyed. Bia, cold and silent. Phobos, his dark lips curling faintly with hidden cruelty. Aeschylus, his thin robes drifting like dream mist around him as his pale eyes blinked with heavy slowness. Hera turned to face them, her crimson robes rippling softly around her ankles. "When I am gone tomorrow," she said, her voice quiet but edged with unbreakable steel, "you will do what must be done. No mistakes. No hesitation." Kratos inclined his head deeply. Bia's eyes flickered with silent obedience. Phobos smiled wider, his teeth white and cold in the dim brazier light. Aeschylus said nothing, but his pale hands twisted softly in the folds of his robe, dream mist coiling between his long fingers. Poseidon stood silently behind Hera, his dark eyes locked on the burning brazier flames. Outside, the last light of day faded into deep indigo. The torches along Olympus's high halls flickered into life one by one, casting long, restless shadows across the silent marble floors. Hera closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the heavy scent of sandalwood and jasmine around her. When she opened them, her gaze burned dark and cold. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we begin." And far above Olympus, the first stars flickered against the violet sky, silent and watchful as the gods moved beneath them, weaving shadows across a world that would soon bleed with storms no mortal could ever name. The dawn sky over Olympus was pale gold, the first light breaking over marble towers and quiet olive groves. Cool breezes drifted through the high colonnades, carrying the scent of morning rain far below in the mortal world. In Zeus's private halls, servants moved quickly, holding deep indigo robes and fastening golden clasps across his broad shoulders. His golden hair fell down his back like rippling sunlight. Lightning flickered softly beneath his skin with each quiet exhale. Hera stood beside him, her dark hair pinned into a braided crown, streaks of gold wire woven between the strands. Her crimson robe shimmered faintly with embroidered feathers that caught the dawn light with each shift of her body. She adjusted her golden sash with slow precision, her dark eyes unblinking as she watched her reflection in the polished bronze mirror before her. "You look radiant," Zeus said quietly, his voice deep and rough with sleep still lingering at its edges. Hera didn't respond at first. She pinned the last golden comb into her hair before turning to him, her face calm, expressionless. "I always do," she said softly. Zeus studied her for a moment before nodding once. He reached for his scepter resting against the table, its lightning-shaped crest glowing softly in the dim morning light. The doors to their chambers opened quietly, and Métis entered. Her lavender robes pulled softly around her feet, her dark hair falling loose over her shoulders. She bowed her head to them both, her quiet eyes steady. "You leave now for Asgard?" she asked. Zeus nodded, stepping forward. "We do. The naming ceremony begins at high noon. Odin will be waiting." Métis looked to Hera then, her gaze warm but distant. "Safe travels, Hera. May your return be swift." Hera's lips curved faintly, though the smile did not reach her eyes. "Thank you, Métis." Zeus reached out and touched Métis's shoulder lightly. "Guard Olympus in my absence," he said, his voice carrying quiet authority. Métis inclined her head slightly. "Always." Zeus turned away without another word, his golden robe swirling softly as he walked towards the outer halls. Hera followed him, her sandals silent against the marble floors. Behind them, Métis watched, her pale fingers curling slightly in the folds of her robe. Outside, 2 golden chariots waited, each pulled by white steeds with wings of bronze feathers. Servants bowed low as Zeus and Hera stepped into the first chariot. The horses snorted softly, their bridles ringing with thin silver chains. Zeus took the reins with one massive hand, his golden eyes narrowing as he looked towards the horizon. "Ready?" he asked. Hera said nothing, simply folding her hands in her lap, her dark eyes fixed on the rising sun. With a flick of his wrist, the chariot surged forward, the winged horses leaping into the pale sky. Wind tore past them as Olympus fell away beneath, golden towers shrinking into small silent pillars atop the vast mountain. The world blurred below them, silver rivers curling through green forests, distant mortal cities waking to their quiet dawns. The ride was silent. Hera watched the sky ahead, her face calm as carved stone, her dark hair whipping around her shoulders in the cold wind. Finally, the rainbow arc of Bifrost came into view ahead of them, its fractured lights glowing softly against the morning sky. The chariot soared down towards it, landing lightly on the shimmering bridge before slowing to a halt at the gates of Asgard. Golden towers rose around them, carved with runes that pulsed faintly in the dawn light. Banners of red and black drifted from high battlements. Servants in dark tunics bowed low as Zeus and Hera stepped from the chariot onto the smooth stone floors of Gladsheim's entry hall. They were led through tall iron-banded doors into the main gathering chamber. The hall was vast, lit with flickering braziers of blue flame. Spear racks lined the walls, and carved wolf-head columns rose to meet the dark timber beams above. As they entered, a faint shuffling sounded to their right. Zeus paused, glancing sideways just in time to see a small boy dart behind a pillar. A thin string was stretched across the walkway before them, tied to a bronze jug balanced on its edge. Hera frowned faintly, but Zeus chuckled softly under his breath. "Children," he murmured. Before they could step forward, Odin's deep voice rang through the hall. "Loki." The small boy stepped out slowly from behind the pillar, his thin frame wrapped in a dark green tunic tied with gold cord. Long black hair framed sharp green eyes that flickered with mischievous defiance. "Yes, father?" he asked, his voice careful, chin tilted slightly upward. "Do you think it wise," Odin said, his single eye narrowing beneath his iron brow, "to prank the king of Olympus on the day of your brother's naming?" Loki's mouth curved faintly into a thin smile. "It was only a test, All-Father. To see if he noticed." Zeus laughed then, a deep, rumbling sound that filled the echoing hall. The thin tension in the air faded at once. "Let him be, Odin," Zeus said, waving a massive hand dismissively. "They are boys. Tricks and pranks are their language." Loki's eyes flickered to Zeus, a spark of admiration hidden beneath his arrogant grin. Thor, taller and broader despite being only slightly older, came stomping forward from across the hall, his blonde hair tied roughly back, thick arms bare beneath his leather sparring harness. "Loki!" he shouted, grabbing the smaller boy by the back of his collar. You're going to get whipped one day for all these tricks. Loki twisted out of his grip, straightening his tunic with quick, graceful fingers. Only if they catch me. Thor scowled, but Zeus only chuckled again, shaking his head as he stepped forward, Hera silent at his side. Odin rose from his seat atop the wide iron and gold throne, his massive frame draped in a heavy black wolf fur cloak. "Welcome, Zeus. Welcome, Hera," he said, his deep voice carrying the quiet force of old storms. "You honor Asgard with your presence." Zeus bowed his head slightly, the golden strands of his hair falling around his stern, handsome face. "And you honor Olympus with your invitation," he said. His golden eyes flicked sideways to Loki and Thor still bickering quietly beside a spear rack. "Your sons are strong." Odin's single eye softened faintly as he turned to watch them. "They will need to be." Hera watched Loki quietly, her dark eyes unreadable as she studied the thin boy with mischief in his gaze and quiet fury hidden beneath his mocking smile. They were led forward then, deeper into the gathering hall. Servants in dark linen moved around them, lighting fresh braziers and scattering thin petals of dried rowan and mistletoe across the stone floors. The naming ceremony would begin soon, and with it, the weaving of fate's next threads. Zeus walked tall and silent at Hera's side, his robe trailing across the runed stone like dusk falling across a quiet sea, as the gods of Asgard gathered in solemn witness to the birth of a new power.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.